Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1332 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news out of Venezuela because Venezuela has ordered the full mobilization of their armed forces against the United States, soon to be joined by MIL Team 6. Also, Pakistan has struck Afghanistan as the ceasefire fails, and also China has begun a major political purge as officers become disloyal to Xi Jinping. We have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to cover the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments in every single corner of the globe, including the Americas, the Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, Central Asia, as well as East Asia, practically the entirety of the world. And we were able to hear major news inside of Venezuela that the Venezuelan government has now announced the mobilization of millions of militia members and the armed forces in preparation for a U.S. invasion. This came today as the United States government, through the office of the president, has stated that Venezuela has practically offered the entirety of the country and everything short of unconditional surrender to the United States in prior offers from the Venezuelan government, and the United States has flat out refused each and every single one of those offers and has not even given a counter. This is giving us a very clear indicator at this point that the United States of America is adamant on an armed invasion of the country and an armed overthrow of the Maduro government. The Maduro government has also mobilized around 17,000 soldiers of the Venezuelan regular army towards to the area of the Colombian border to strengthen border security in an emergency situation. Outside of that, we have been able to hear that inside of the People's Republic of China, there have been major purges today inside the Central Military Committee, as another top general has been removed from his position, and He Weidong, one of the highest up leaders of the CMC, outside of Xi Jinping himself, has actually been stripped of his Chinese Communist Party membership as of today. In the meantime, the war between Afghanistan and Pakistan has erupted once more, with significant firefights breaking out along large parts of the border, and simultaneously, the Pakistanis have stated that they will be continuing this conflict well on into the future. This was after the Taliban broke the ceasefire 8 hours before its conclusion by conducting kamikaze drone attacks on Pakistani positions along the border. We have also been able to hear official corroboration once again today by the Indians that no such statements have been made by India to the United States that they are going to be limiting their purchases of Russian oils in exchange for the United States. While at the same time, Exxon has reported today that India is now purchasing Exxon's oil, which is an American company. A little bit odd with that, and once again adding even more questionability as to whether or not the Indians are truly lying about that public statement. In the meantime, the Israelis have also been able to hear today from Hamas that Hamas is actually going to maintain armed control of the Gaza Strip, even as the Israelis are withdrawing, clearly showing us that that war is going to start up again here probably within weeks. In the meantime, we have also heard inside of Eastern Europe that the Estonians have completely closed all of their borders with the Russian Federation. The Moscow city area has come under another drone attack. The Avangard chemical plant inside the city of Stirlitomak has come under attack today within the Ufa or Bashkortostan Oblast inside of eastern Russia, and we've also been able to hear that the NOTAM has been issued over the entirety of the Chasiv Yar missile range, most likely for upcoming tests. The Ukrainian armed forces have been able to hold the Russian Federation back today significantly in a large amount of fronts, and not only that, have been able to inflict high casualties onto the Russian Federation's armed forces. In short, we actually have quite a decent amount of news to get into over the course of the day, and we are, of course, going to be making sure to go through each and every single bit of detail that we have of all of the news from today and everything else in between throughout the course of this show, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down through the night into the other major stories that we have. But moving us on into the first and largest story of the night, we have been able to hear about the ongoing situation with the nation of Venezuela between the United States of America and the Venezuelans. From what we are understanding at this point, the nation of Venezuela is now announcing the full mobilization of millions of militia members inside of the country, as Maduro is continuing to insist that the United States military is building up in the Caribbean, the largest of which it's been since the 1980s, and appears to be planning on some form of an armed invasion inside of Venezuela. At the same time, we have also been able to hear that Venezuela has mobilized 17,000 of their armed forces, which are now along the eastern border of the country with Colombia, or the western border of the country near to Colombia, to conduct security operations with the rising tensions existent within the region. At the same time, we have been able to hear off of the coast that Venezuela has also once again come under attack, as we were able to confirm last night, that the President of the United States confirmed that the U.S. strike off the coast of Venezuela yesterday, in which survivors were rescued, was against a narco sub, quipping, "I don't know very many people who have submarines." We also have been able to hear additional information that apparently the survivors of this submarine, at least a few of them, are in custody, as 2 alleged narco-terrorists were killed and 2 survived a drone strike yesterday on a cartel drug trafficking semi-submersible off of the coast of Venezuela, with the survivors being rescued last night by a U.S. Navy MH-60 before being transferred to a naval vessel operating as part of the Joint Task Force in the Southern Caribbean, according to Reuters. These are the first confirmed survivors of a U.S. attack inside of the Caribbean that we have seen so far, and it is starting to suggest that some important information may to come out here in the near future, hopefully to the public, about whether or not these people are actually involved in any form of cartel operations, considering that a large amount of these strikes have been criticized by the public due to their lack of visual identifications or proof of identifications to the public that any of these vessels are involved in narco-terrorist operations or involved in any sort of armed operations for that matter at all. Still, the United States of America has also made its position incredibly clear on Venezuela as of today, as we were able to hear that there were additional statements made about the situation with Venezuela as far as it was going today. And really quickly, I want to make sure to get y'all to that, at least at this point, because in this video here, which I will not play because it actually has some expletives in it, which was played on national television today, which is quite odd. You would think the FCC would have an issue with that because that's usually a $10,000 fine. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that according to the President of the United States, Venezuela has actually given offers to the United States of America to try and appease them and avoid any form of an armed conflict or an armed invasion of the United States inside the nation of Venezuela. Apparently, the President of the United States then additionally stated, as was seen in this clip, if you would like to watch it, the link is in the description below, additionally stated that the United States has refused all offers, no matter the type of offer that is involved, because, and quote, the Venezuelans and Maduro doesn't want to F around with the United States. That was the statement made by the President of the United States today. Considering the information that we now have from the President that there has been offers given to the United States of America, we are now taking the assumption that all prior rumored offers that we have heard about are actually accurate offers that were presented to the United States and then shot down by U.S. diplomatic staff as unacceptable. We have seen in the past, at least according to the rumored offers that the Venezuelans have given the United States, that including the slow removal of Maduro from power, which was touted in one of these proposed agreements, we have also heard that Venezuela would give preferential treatment to all U.S. companies inside the Venezuelan economy, and also will conduct further actions that will pretty much tie Venezuela economically by anchored, pretty much for the larger point, to the United States of America and its markets, and largely delete any Chinese or Russian economic and diplomatic influence that would exist inside of the country. Apparently, at least according to what we understand right now, that is completely unacceptable to the President of the United States of America, and we're looking for something farther than that. To be entirely honest with y'all, if we were to take the prior rumors of the offers at face value, which we now will, because the President of the United States has said that they've given multiple incredibly enticing offers to the United States that have been shot down, everything that the United States would achieve through an armed invasion of Venezuela has practically already been offered to the United States of America by the Maduro regime up front. The Maduro regime has stated that they would give American companies preferential treatment. They would allow for the United States to develop and extract oils from their oil fields at Lake Maracaibo and other areas of the country. They would also allow U.S. businesses of all types into the country. They would completely sever any direct connection to the People's Republic of China or Chinese influence inside of the country. And not only that, they will slowly start to fade Maduro out of power and replace him with an American-led government as long as Maduro is not imprisoned or executed in any form of an existing government in the future. This is something that is a little bit odd, considering that these offers that the Venezuelans have given may as well be unconditional surrender without us even going to war. Anything that we could achieve by invading Venezuela and occupying them has already been offered to us by the Venezuelans so far. And this has led a lot of people to wonder whether or not the United States is certain to invade the country at this point, also considering that at the same time Maduro is mobilizing millions of militia members and also appears to be moving the regular army, which is about 120,000 strong, throughout the country in preparation to try and defend the nation in case of the United States was to invade by land or by sea. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so Venezuela finally took the big step we were waiting to see. They have mass mobilized their military, and Maduro's claiming it's millions of people. But of course, that's a claim by a dictator, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But he has mobilized whatever forces he has at his disposal. They are currently mobilized, and they're probably not well trained, but that's what they have. So it seems like the invasion is imminent. But what are your thoughts about this whole situation? And it looks like 40% said the U.S. is certain to invade Venezuela, while 31% said Maduro is merely panicking right now, and that's why he's suddenly mobilizing all these troops. And 23% said something's coming, but probably not invasion. So right now, all we know is Maduro is panicking, and it sounds like Maduro has been reaching out to the United States government to try to prevent this situation from getting worse, and it sounds like he has been largely turned down by the United States. So I don't really see a way for him to negotiate his way out of this, and I'm really not sure why the U.S. has really taken such a hardline stance with Maduro, because if Maduro is truly making these really unbelievable offers that he will step aside and give up the government, then why is the U.S. still pursuing an invasion or an attack on Venezuela? That seems a little bit odd to me. So I don't think we're getting the full story here. Someone, probably Maduro, is making something up, and we don't know the whole story. But one thing that does seem certain, though, is some type of military action will be taken against Venezuela. There are way too many naval and air force assets of the United States in the area right off the coast for them not to take some sort of action. So it seems almost like a personal problem that the U.S. president has with Maduro. It seems like it's gone beyond diplomacy, and it's gone more toward a personal conflict between the two. I'm not really sure why. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that at this point, I would be with the 39%. The United States is guaranteed going to be invading Venezuela at some point in the future, as we are pretty much forcing the situation into an armed invasion. From what we understand, none of the prior offers that have been supposedly touted or at least given to the United States by the Venezuelans were ever leaked by the Venezuelans. All of them were leaked by internal members of the U.S. government that were privy to the diplomatic situation and developments with Venezuela. So for that reason, we are largely assuming that all of the rumors about the prior deals and arrangements or offers that were given by the Venezuelans were given at face value, exactly as we were hearing them when they were apparently coming out. With that in mind, considering that the U.S. has rejected all of those offers and that the President of the United States made that incredibly clear today, that regardless how good the offer was, they were being flat out rejected, this is something that is leading me to believe there is a little bit more going on here than meets the eye. We have been stating for the longest time that this was to curb Chinese influence, which, according to what we know, the Maduro regime has already offered to pretty much remove all Chinese influence from the country as long as they're not invaded by the United States. A very similar sort of an arrangement that Panama made with the United States in the earlier part of the year. That pretty much achieves exactly everything that we would want out of Venezuela in practicality. Then that was rejected. Then it was also stated by the Venezuelans that they would slowly remove Maduro from power, at least according to insiders in the U.S. government and the rumors that spread about that offer. That was also rejected as well. So at this point, I really do not know why we would still be gunning for an invasion of Venezuela, because based on the past two offers, we literally would pretty much win without even fighting a war by the offers that supposedly were given, as in the rumors that were circling around inside of the U.S. government in the prior days. So I would have to say I really do not know why we would even pursue this war if we're getting the full picture here in the public as clearly as possible, because we could have already accepted the offers and pretty much achieved everything that we would have done in a war without getting involved in the war. So I would have to say, folks, I am a little bit confused as to the motives or what we're actually doing here at this point. Because if I was the President of the United States and these offers were actually given to us that we've heard about over the prior days, I would have accepted them because they would have achieved exactly what we were looking for. And if the Venezuelans didn't hold up their end of the bargain, well, we go to war with them anyways. And then that ends up ending the whole scenario either way. It's not like they can get support from anyone like the Chinese or the Russians. They might as well be on their own, even if they ended up buying themselves time. So that's something that's a little bit odd to me. Also, I see someone saying in the chat, Centurion Marcus said oil. Well, here's the thing, like, that I don't think y'all are getting here, is that according to the rumored offers that the Venezuelans gave, they would pretty much give over the oil fields to the United States in U.S. companies for them to come down there and invest in extracting the oil and extract the oil from the oil fields. So if we're going down there for oil, I mean, they already gave us an offer where we pretty much would have control of the oil fields pretty much entirely. We are going to be given, at least according to some of the rumored offers, preferential treatment to be able to allow U.S. companies to go down there and extract the oil. So then what is the point of even invading the country? Because once again, the deal achieves literally anything that we could have been looking for from what we know from the rumors about what the offer was. So I don't even know why in the world we're still pushing forward with this idea of you don't F with the USA. Because for one, I don't really know of the Venezuelans effing with the USA, at least recently. They kind of mind their own selves in poverty and in an absolute hellhole down there. On the other hand, the Russians are effing with the United States and the Chinese are effing with the United States, and we don't really see ourselves gearing up to just go and start nuking them tomorrow in a figurative sense for some reason or another. So I really do not know why in the world we have it out for the Venezuelans at this point like this, because we could have just accepted the offer and achieved everything that we wanted to anyways. But anyways, with that, a lot of people are also additionally talking about why in the world does it appear that war is starting to look imminent at this point? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so this is a big question right here because I believe the U.S. president said something to this effect. He said today, in the midst of dropping the F-bomb about the whole Venezuela situation, the U.S. president also mentioned that Maduro had allegedly offered everything. So it seems to match up with the reporting we had heard before that Maduro was calling up the U.S. government and saying that he was willing to step down or willing to make large concessions to avoid a war, and it sounds like the U.S. has largely rejected those proposals. Yet at the same time, though, it seems that war is imminent. imminent. So something's not lining up. So what are your thoughts? 35% said this has become personal to the United States, and that's why they're still pursuing it. While 36% said Maduro probably hasn't made such offers, and 13% said the U.S. will accept it eventually. So honestly, I'm having a hard time believing that Maduro would offer to step down and simply walk away. That seems a little bit weird. If he was willing to do that, why wouldn't he do that by default and simply walk off and save his own skin? Obviously, he's still in power right now. He hasn't walked away. So I'm not really sure if I buy that. I think that might be maybe some type of hype talk, maybe like making Maduro seem like he's more of a coward than he truly is, because I have a hard time believing that. I don't think he's offered to step down in my personal speculation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the offer to step down is probably a little bit of a stretch, but the offer to allow the U.S. to pretty much come in and economically run the country or give us preferential treatment, that's something that certainly could have been offered because it would help him to remain in power, yet at the same time it would also avoid the United States invading the country and forcibly deposing him through that armed invasion. So I would have to say that I would also say it's a bit of a stretch to say that Maduro ever made an offer to where you could possibly step down. But at the same time, we do know that incredibly enticing offers have been made. That's what the President of the United States said today. So it's not really like it's a question about what Maduro said. The president's even said that there were very enticing offers given by the Venezuelans. And so we would have to assume that the one that involved giving the United States preferential access into Venezuela would have to be the case at this point. Because what other enticing offer have we heard about that's been made or has even been alluded to? And that's the only one. So that must be the one the president is talking about. Still, I would have to say that for some reason, this appears to have started to largely become personal. And another thing that I also have to add is that as far as some people talking about they're dealing with the cartels, we've spoken about this an endless amount here on the air. There is no way to deal with the cartels by invading Venezuela. That doesn't make any sense at all. We invade Venezuela, and so the cartels don't end. Because the cartel's in Colombia, it's in all of the Central American states between Mexico and Colombia, it's in Mexico, it's everywhere else but Venezuela. So you invade Venezuela, and those cartels just pack up and move across the border into Colombia. It doesn't even end anything. It just ends up shifting them around. It's like the war on terror. You just end up destroying one terror group, and they either go into hiding until you leave, and then they pop back up after you've left, or they continue to just fight you for an endless amount of time, and it ends up becoming a forever war because they're asymmetrical, and also on top of that, generally some form of an ideology, so it's incredibly hard to combat that, and we end up fighting that until we eventually leave, and they end up just popping up in full force again after we're gone. There really isn't any way to deal with this if that is the actual reason in any effective way in terms of fighting the cartel. So we've always been going, well, on this channel, the only logical end that we could come up with is that this is to deal with Chinese influence. But according to rumored offers that the Venezuelans have given to the United States, per the accounts of U.S. officials involved in the matter, they have said that the Venezuelans have completely offered to pretty much delete Chinese influence out of their country and allow the United States to pretty much economically anchor itself inside the Venezuelan economy from here forward, which was outright rejected, apparently, from what we were understanding from the president. So what are we trying to achieve? We really do not know. And that's something that is quite big question to me. One, what is the point at this point of rejecting all offers from the Venezuelans and largely pushing this into a full-blown war? I really do not know. But moving on,
you don't think the U.S. is getting frustrated with not making progress with Russia and Ukraine and China, etc. And just to take out anger, they're going to go down there and put the hurt on Venezuela, despite the fact that it sounds like Maduro is generally kowtowing to the United States. It sounds like the U.S. is hell bent on it. And here's the thing, folks: we don't know the whole story. We're going off the public reporting on it, but it may not be the whole story. So something is not making sense here. Something is clearly not making sense. So whatever the case is, to me, it looks like war is imminent in Venezuela. I'm not really sure if it's impossible or if it's possible for the U.S. to simply walk away from this whole situation without doing anything, because otherwise, this might be the biggest waste of money that the U.S. has ever conducted using the military forces in history, because we have sent so many assets down there. If we simply walk off tomorrow from that whole situation and say, oh, whatever, it'll just take care of itself, and then withdraw all of our military assets, that would have been a humongous waste of money, one of the worst. So I don't know. It seems like war is coming, but I don't understand really why. I'm not really sure if anybody understands why at this point, to be perfectly honest.
I I really don't get it at all. I don't really get at this point why we would have built up the forces there, why we are pushing for a war with Venezuela. Because once again, folks, this channel always analyzes things from a pro-American, pro-Western perspective, and uses that as our base analytics of what's a good idea and what's not a good idea. If the Venezuelans truly did give the offer, and let me go to last week's map to show y'all this, because we actually have it on that map, so let me go get it. Let's see here. Let me go pull it up. 1 second, folks. I want to make sure to pull out the receipt because some people are always wanting to say that we're not telling the truth and we're lying or something. So let me go pull out the receipt so that way I can show you all this. And let me go through here. Let's see. Let's see. Officially in trade war. Large announcements. Refusal to sign. Mini nuclear reactor. Terror still on track. Let's see. Crush the cartels. Stock market. Let's see. Let's see here. It might be down in Venezuela. Let me go check that really quickly because it might be down here. Let me show you all the map I'm looking at here. So it's probably one of these, I'm assuming. And let me go down here. Oh, here we are. This is it. This is the backroom deal. So I'll just read to y'all what was reported according to an exclusive report to the New York Times, which has been fairly credible with their reporting. During recent secret negotiations with the current administration, the Venezuelan president offered to open up all existing future oil and gold projects to American companies, give preferential contracts to American businesses, reverse the flow of Venezuelan oil exports from China to the United States, and slash the country's energy and mining contracts with China, Iran, and Russia. The U.S. government refused the deal and now halted any further diplomatic negotiations with Venezuela, according to an exclusive report from the New York Times. So this is the only offer that we know of that was rumored over the past week. There it is right there, that was made by the Venezuelans to the United States, and it's not the offer where it was supposed that Venezuela would slowly remove Maduro from power over some period of time. That is the only offer that we know of, and that was the one that was directly alluded to by the President of the United States today in the Oval Office, from what we're assuming, where we have heard, what is the diplomatic situation with Venezuela? And he said, well, they've given us some really good offers, but we shot all of them down because you don't F with the United States. And that was the statement made. So at this point, why in the world would we not accept that? I mean, read it again, folks, just in case, you're really, deep in the Kool-Aid. Let's just read this again on what the Venezuelans are offering. Open up all existing future and oil and gold projects to American companies. So at this point, there is no necessity to the U.S. invading them for oil. They're pretty much giving it up, according to this offer. Give preferential contracts to American businesses. So at that point, we can anchor ourselves as heavily into the Venezuelan economy as we want. And if they ever try and go back towards the Chinese direction, we could economically destroy them at that point because we'll be heavily entrenched in their economy. Reverse the flow of Venezuelan oil exports from China to the United States. Once again, quite clearly, we aren't invading them for the oil at that point, if that's what people are saying. I mean, at least according to this offer that we know of from the New York Times, they're saying that they would pretty much completely reverse the exports from China to the U.S. anyways. And also slash the country's energy and mining contracts with China, Iran, and Russia, completely stopping any form of economic development or growth or a growing sphere of influence by China, Iran, or Russia inside of Venezuela. Pretty much reversing the current situation and economically making Venezuela a mini member of the U.S. economic sphere within the Americas. And apparently we refused that deal. I mean, this deal practically achieved everything we would do anyways if we invaded the country and overthrew Maduro. So I really do not know what the point would be. And also, another thing, people keep on saying it's to deal with the cartels. Once again, there is no way to deal with the cartels by invading Venezuela. That just doesn't make any sense. Like, if that's the logic we're working with, we're already setting up for disaster. That's like saying, my entire driveway is cracked and turning into dirt, like the concrete's completely destroyed, so I'm going to pave 1 square foot of it, and that's going to fix the whole problem. The whole driveway will magically become paved at that point, and the problem will be fixed. That doesn't make any sense, because the cartels exist through the entirety of South and Central America.
Unless you plan on invading Venezuela and then moving on and invading Colombia and then moving on from there, you're not going to be able to deal with the problem. So unless the U.S. is planning on going on a South American conquistador mission or something, then dealing with Venezuela alone is not going to handle the cartel issue. It might handle a couple of them. There are a couple of cartels that operate solely out of Venezuela, but there's just so many. It's like a small dent in the whole issue, and it's not worth it to invade just Venezuela to deal with just the cartel issue. If it's something else like Chinese influence, then it might be worth it. But, it's just a small dent in the cartel problem in that one country.
Yeah, I would have to say. And also, I saw someone say, do you really expect Maduro's government to honor their word? Well, yeah, at this point I would, because the alternative is that they don't honor their word, and we go down there and we try Maduro and eventually hang him for some form of crimes that he's conducted. So he would end up dead if he broke his word anyways. So I would pretty much guarantee you he would follow through on his word, because the alternative is that the United States goes down there and kills him anyways. So there really is no reason for him to break his word, because at what point, if he breaks his word, what's going to happen? Is he going to have some sort of magical protection? No, he's not. We could still invade him anyways. At that point, we'd have an incredibly good reason to, because he broke a whole bunch of agreements that he made with the United States of America that would be codified by international treaty, and on top of that, he would be jeopardizing U.S. interests within the nation. So at that point, we actually have very credible reasons to invade him for any reason at that point, whether they're aggressive or not. Saying, do we really trust him in his word? I mean, he has no other choice. He either gives us what we want at this point, or he doesn't, and we invade his country and wipe him out. And then if he does give us what we want, and then he goes back on his word later, we invade his country and we wipe him out. Once again, it ends up in the same situation that it is now. And the Chinese can't provide them any support. Like, that would be asinine to believe, because the Chinese are just reaching Australia right now with their navy, and that's breaking world news whenever it happens, is that they're finally sailing the Chinese navy around Australia, first time in history. So they're not going to be making the giant leap of sailing the entire Chinese navy to Venezuela to give them some guns and weapons, or for that matter, protect them in the future from a potential U.S. invasion at that point. They don't even have the power projection abilities to be able to do that, or to even carry that through for any long amount of time, even if they got a warship to Venezuela in the first place. So I hope that addresses that the best I can with this whole situation, because at this point, folks, I'm just going to be straight up with y'all. This is not really making all too much sense. But moving on out of that, we have been able to hear that while things are looking a little bit confusing, at least here in the Americas today, things are looking a lot more clear, at least in the People's Republic of China today. So moving all on over into Beijing, we were able to hear that another high-up leader in the Central Military Committee has been purged. This is now the second military official that has been removed after He Wei-dong, which was removed from the Central Military Committee's chairman. Well, not chairman, but vice chairman of the Central Military Committee several months ago, who was the second highest, most important person within the Central Military Committee, rather than the chairman, Xi Jinping. We've now heard that another top official of the Central Military Committee has been removed as of today from his position, and we have also been able to hear that as of today, He Wei-dong has been removed not only as the vice chairman of the Central Military Committee, but he has also been stripped of his Chinese Communist Party membership, which is actually quite significant. If y'all do not know this, very interesting fact about China, joining the political party that runs China, the Chinese Communist Party, is actually a fairly lengthy process. And once you achieve that, you're usually considered to be at a higher up status than most of the population. Out of the 1.4 billion people who live in the People's Republic of China, only 110 million of them are active members or actual registered members of the Chinese Communist Party. To really get anywhere inside of China socially, you have to be a member of the Chinese Communist Party. So with this guy being stripped from the party and his membership, this pretty much means that the guy has ceased to exist in any meaningful way, and any sort of connections or political pull or sway that he had internally within the Chinese Communist Party has literally been deleted as of today because of this move. So it does appear that Xi Jinping is continuing a purge of the People's Liberation Army and the Central Military Committee, as we are continuing to see the schism that is quietly existent between the two groups. What's been interesting in China, at least recently, is that there's starting to become a shift between the civilian administration in China, which is the Chinese Communist Party, and the military administration of the country, which is the People's Liberation Army, which is operated through the Central Military Committee. This is something that has started to become an issue recently because Xi Jinping, who's been the leader of China for about a little over a decade at this point, has been moving the country into what we call Jinpingism, which is a newer form of like hybrid communist ideologies that Xi Jinping is trying to conduct, and he's also trying to create a cult of personality around him to where every single facet and system of the government is loyal more so to him than anything else. This has been butting heads with the Central Military Committee and the People's Liberation Army in particular, as the People's Liberation Army is an extremely traditional and conservative communist force inside the country. They strictly believe in Maoist ideology, and also have completely rejected Jinpingism in the past. Due to this, we've seen that there has been rising tensions between the civilian body of the government, the CCP, and the military body of the government, the CMC, and this has started to come to a head recently as propaganda posters have actually been coming out from the PLA against the Chinese Communist Party, stating that they really do not have China's best interest in mind. For this reason, He Weidong, who was the first to go in this purge, the second highest up person, only second to Xi Jinping in the Central Military Committee, was arrested and now has been stripped of his party membership as of today. We are now hearing that an additional member of the Central Military Committee has also been removed today due to an anti-corruption campaign, which generally means that they're going through and trying to weed out anyone who is not a diehard Jinping loyalist. So it does appear that a lot of people have been talking about this significant development that's happening in China today, which is still clearly showing that there is a political threat to Xi Jinping's power that is being posed by the higher-up officials of the People's Liberation Army. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it seems a bit weird that China's routinely expelling top military leaders these days, and once again, for a very cohesive country that has their shit together, as they say, it looks like they're having some issues with corruption, which seems to be something that Russia has issues with as well, and they just suddenly oust top leadership all the time. So China expelled 2 top military leaders today, and the big question is China purging disloyal officers, or are they actually charging these people with corruption because they're actually being corrupt? 67%, the overwhelming majority, said yes, it's a political loyalty purge, while 16% said no, it's actually corruption issues, and 10% said it's too early to tell. And this is pretty much par for the course for both Russia and China. Whenever they start having loyalty issues, or people are not pledging loyalty to the great grand leader, then they start charging people with corruption. So I would personally speculate that these individuals are taken out of their command and charged, or I believe they've been charged, they've been removed for certain. They've been removed because they are currently having loyalty issues to Xi Jinping. So not a good sign for the Chinese military. Who knows what led to this? It could have been a myriad of things that led to it. It could be issues with the upcoming Taiwan invasion. It could be simply they're getting tired of Xi Jinping and his whole antics that he's doing. Right now, we simply don't know. But I'm with the 67%. I think it is a political loyalty purge. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to go with 67%. This is certainly a political loyalty purge, as anti-corruption campaigns have been ongoing since 2017 inside the People's Republic of China, and generally have never appeared to follow any sort of actual anti-corruption campaign. It's largely been to remove anyone who is not a staunch loyalist of Xi Jinping's inside the People's Liberation Army and the Central Military Committee as a whole. We've also seen a similar thing being conducted in the Russian Federation as well, largely since 2014 when they started to conduct some larger military reforms, although Russia's real military reforms started in 2016. We have seen anti-corruption campaigns also being conducted in Russia as well, which generally do not fight corruption, but more so fight and remove anyone who appears to have questionable loyalties to Putin. So I would have to highly say that this is pretty much an analogous sort of an anti-corruption campaign to the type that we've been seeing in Russia, to where they're trying to remove people who are not loyal to the current leader inside the country and to instill or install people who would be strictly loyal to his leadership and his commands, even if they go in the face of Maoist ideology and beliefs, which are incredibly important to the People's Liberation Army and their ideals and cultural ethos, at least within their little group that they have. But still, a fairly interesting development coming out of China today, and one that we're going to continue to watch, because with these sorts of developments happening, there is always a slight chance or a likelihood that this could boil over into some sort of an attempted coup. Considering that people are being removed that do not have a 100% perfect track record of being loyal to Xi Jinping, some people may be seeing that their ticket is about to be called and may try to move against Xi Jinping here in the future while they still have at least some form of a chance of even trying the attempt. So we'll have to generally watch this with an incredibly large amount of attention, because there is a decent chance in the midst of this that a coup attempt might be conducted, although once again a significant chance compared to normal is around 5 to 7%. So it's not incredibly large, but it's still larger than we'd normally see. Moving on out of the People's Republic of China, however, we've also heard that according to South Korean intelligence, they have apparently stated that there has been some movement being noticed at a North Korean missile launch site, possibly reportedly indicating preparations for a test launch of the new Hwasong 20 ICBM. The Hwasong 20 ICBMs were paraded through Pyongyang recently, a few weeks ago, and appear to be soon to be tested by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, aka North Korea. This will be the first time, I believe, that we have seen the test of a Hwasong 20, at least in the entirety of this year, which will be a significant event, and also will continue to show that the North Koreans are developing and working on nuclear weaponry that not only can target the United States of America, but practically the entire world at large, putting them under the threat of any form of a nuclear attack if anyone makes any moves against the North Koreans. A fairly interesting development, to say the least. Also, by the way, to get y'all to another major development today, we have also been able to hear that Zelensky has visited the United States and did have a meeting with the President of the United States over the course of the day. Before I get to that, though, I have to include these comical bits out of Alaska. One, the Russians have proposed building a tunnel between the Russian Federation and the United States of America. This is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, but I'll tell it to y'all, considering the Russians actually seriously pitched this. A Kremlin envoy urged Elon Musk and the Boring Company to help build a $65 billion undersea rail tunnel linking Russia and Alaska. Kirill Dmitriev proposed the Putin-Trump tunnel, claiming Musk's tech could cut costs to $8 billion and finish in 8 years. The pitch came after a call between the President of Russia and the President of the United States about Ukraine, with further talks planned in Budapest.
Honestly, man, this is like the best thing I've ever heard in a long time. Honestly, I think there was a society back in the day that had a similar idea. It was called the Trojan horse. They built it and gave it to them as a gift. They said, "Here you go, take this horse. Fantastic horse. Don't you want a mega giant horse? Like, you got to have one. Like, everybody's got one. Here, take it. Bring it right into your capital city." And I said, "Yeah, thank you so much for that horse." And then all the soldiers jumped out of the horse and invaded the whole place. It seems kind of like a similar thing. Kind of like we're building literally the tunnel, potentially, that Russia would use to invade Alaska if they wanted to. So, obviously, the Russians are, I think, doing a crapshoot on this one. I think they're just doing some bogus with this. But I don't think anybody in the U.S. is going to seriously consider this. Like, I don't think so. They tried to, I'm not even really sure how they told anybody in the U.S. about this. Did they pitch it to Musk personally, or did they just put this on the media or something?
Apparently, they just put this out. Apparently to Musk and the president, from what I know, at least from what this is saying, it seems that it was pretty much just like approached on the phone call by Putin. By the way, a tunnel would be pretty cool. And then it was approached to Musk or something afterwards. Something along those lines. But really quickly, I have to look at this, folks. Yeah, there's a bit of a problem with this, in the fact that there is no Russian railway that even goes to that area of Russia. At all, as a matter of fact. They're not even close to getting there. This is a Russian rail map of generally the main lines and corridors that exist inside the Russian Federation. The entrance to the tunnel on the Russian side is right here. What the hell's the map doing? It's right here near this little mountainous area right here. It goes through here under the Diomede Islands and then over towards the city of Wales in Alaska. So that's the general path that this is taking. So I want you to look at where that is in Russia. It's all the way up here where my mouse cursor is at. So let's look at the map of the Russian railways. So the closest one is down here at Urgel, way down here. So let me go show y'all where Urgel's at, if I can get the towns here. And let's see, Urgel. Where is Urgel? Let me go type it in here really quickly. So, yes, Urgel, right here. This little rail yard that exists in the literal middle of nowhere. This is the closest railroad on that red dot that gets even close to being where this tunnel idea is proposed, which is, by the crow's flight, about 2,200 miles away. So the Russians would have to build at least a 3,200 mile long railroad, accounting for the mountains, gradients, and so on, that they would have to navigate and negotiate to get up to that area. They'd have to build probably about a 3,200 mile long railroad to even reach this tunnel. And then the other problem is there are no railroads in Alaska. There is one, I will say that. There is the Alaska Railroad. And also, I'm pointing all this out because this is all going to be important in a second for the conclusion here. There is the Alaska Railroad, which let me see if I can get you all a operating rail map. This is the only existing railroad in all of Alaska. This is the only one. There is another one at Skagway, which is down here, but that one's a tourist railroad. It doesn't count for anything. But this is the only railroad. So the tunnel on the Alaskan side comes out near Wales in Alaska. The closest railroad to that is in Fairbanks, Alaska. So we would also have to build, to reach this tunnel, approximately about 600 miles of additional rail to even reach the tunnel. So basically, to put this out there for folks, there is no existent rail traffic even in this area for the tunnel. There's no railroad infrastructure anywhere remotely close to this area. And also, the tunnel is prohibitively expensive to conduct a project that wouldn't even make any sense. Because if you told shippers we were going to take nearly a 4,000 mile long trip by rail through an expensive ass tunnel between Russia and Alaska to make it to Fairbanks, to then end up in another landlocked railroad that has no real connection to the mainland of the United States of America, because all of the railroad cars in Alaska have to be ferried in by barges. There we go. That is absolutely effing stupid. I would not do that. I would just transport everything by shipping container from China to the United States, because that's the only thing that would make reasonable logistical sense at this point, is shipping it by boat or by ship across the Pacific. So this makes no damn sense. The only reason that this was proposed, folks, it was being proposed by the Dollar Invasion Society, or the Dollar Invasion Club, in that the Russians are going to have us, on our own dollar, build a tunnel from Alaska to Russia that could only be used by vehicles like tanks or trucks, because there isn't even a railroad that would use this anywhere in practicality. So the Russians are literally pitching to us, let's build a giant ass tunnel so that way we can just literally drive into your country when we choose to invade it.
Also, it's like, what real purpose does the tunnel even serve? Because why do Russians need to go to the middle of Alaska? It's like there's nothing for the Russians to even do in mid Alaska. So it's like there's no real purpose. Also, did the Russians even state a purpose? Like, I don't even see a purpose stated in this Twitter post right here that was made. So it's just a tunnel for the hell of it. Honestly, like, to me, I'm not joking about this. It really does seem like Russia is trying to con the U.S. into building an invasion tunnel. I'm not really sure what it would be used for, except for a possible military purpose. I'm really not sure.
It makes absolutely no sense at all. And I also want to check this really quickly. Let me find a railroad map of Alaska. Because, I just want to make sure to make this clear. This is a very implausible sort of a proposition here. So, let's take a look. Let's see. The Alaska Railroad, the Alaska Rail Marine Service, that's the one that brings in the rail cars by ferry. There's also the Yukon and Tanana rivers. But I want to make it clear here, those are rivers, not railroads. Because someone just said a second ago that there actually was, correction enforcer, you're totally wrong, there are actually railroads spanning throughout all of Alaska. My only problem with that is that doesn't make any sense, because there's hardly even a population there to support railroad traffic, and the Alaskan Railroad is the only existent railroad in all of Alaska, and it was built by the U.S. government in the prelude to World War I, because they thought, man, this kind of is a little bit stupid for us to be up here in the middle of nowhere, with really no way to reasonably transport anything over land, so it'd be really stupid to leave the major cities of Anchorage and Fairbanks without any railway connection, because that would make things extremely impossible to move around cargo-wise in the state. So that's the only reason why they even have the Alaska Railroad, which is the only functional railroad in the entirety of the state. I would know, folks, because I took a lot of Tylenol as a kid, and I ended up obsessing over railroads. That is the only operational railroad in the state of Alaska. There might be some small connections that Canadian Pacific and Canadian National have into Alaska further on down, but there are no other railroads in all of Alaska but the Alaskan Railroad, and it hardly goes anywhere rather than Anchorage and Fairbanks. So I hope that...
I think Putin's getting land happy out here. He set foot in Alaska, which we should have never let him do, by the way. He should have never been allowed to come to Alaska for that meeting. He set foot in Alaska. He gave a random guy a motorcycle, which was a weird thing to do. He also showed up and walked around and thought, I actually like Alaska. And, Putin tries to always say this whole idea of, Alaska was Russia's and stuff like that. And Alaska was always considered a part of Russia and stuff like that. I think the loon might actually be getting hankering to take Alaska, actually. It seems like it. He's got a hankering to take everywhere else, so why not Alaska too?
Yeah, I would have to say that seems to make the most sense. Also, folks, I gotta dig into this here for a second because some people are saying no, there really is railroad connection into Alaska from elsewhere that is not by ferry, and from what I understand, that could not be the case. From what I would know, let me make sure to double check this for us all. Okay, so the Alaskan border starts right up here, right north of the Graham Island, right there. And so it does not appear, from what I can tell. Let me go pull up a Canadian rail map because they'll have everything on it. The Canadian rails are usually state run. So let's take a look at the Canadian rail map. And no, there is none. There's no real rail connection from the lower 48 directly to Alaska. The only way, and I know a little bit about the Alaskan Railroad, just to say that, not a great deal. It's not like a big point of study of mine, but the only way that rail cars get to Alaska, because this is the huge thing in the rail fanning community that's cool about the Alaska Railroad, is that every single rail car that is in the state has to be brought in by a ferry from sea. So they have to ship all of the rail cars up the Gulf of Alaska from Canada or from the United States up to this little place called Whittier right here. And Whittier has this little spot right out here where there is a ferry access. They connect the ferry to the mainland, and a locomotive comes up and drags all of the cars off of that ferry and into this rail yard, and then they marshal them, classify them, so on and so forth, and then move them by train to Anchorage or to the other cities that are on the line that are a little bit smaller, and also Fairbanks. So while Union Pacific does offer a rail service to get to Alaska, that is not by rail all the way. They have to actually load the cars onto a ferry in Seattle or in Canada and then ship them on up the rest of the way on up to Alaska to Whittier. So I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least from what I know. I'll keep double checking that off air to make sure that that's correct, but that generally is my understanding of how the Alaskan Railroad functions and operates. But still, beyond that, this whole tunnel idea, getting back to that, it just doesn't make any sense, because if we are considering that this is a closed logistics circuit which has a very intermediate connection to the outside world, which is once again by rail ferry, why in the world would building a tunnel into such a limited market, which is Alaska, make any sense, especially considering the exorbitant cost it takes to make a tunnel like that, especially an undersea tunnel? It makes no
And
sense.
also the seismically active area that is too. You're building a tunnel in an area where it's extremely seismically active. So I'm not even sure if it's possible or even safe to build a tunnel in that region. Isn't this right here like in the middle of where tectonic plates meet, like in between Russia and Alaska?
I would have to say, I think it. Well, let's look at the tectonic plate map. Tectonic plate map. Let's go take a look. Oh no, actually, it's down near the Aleutians, down here.
Ah, okay, but it's still the same region though. If an earthquake even struck down near the Aleutians, it would still have a pretty large effect, even where that tunnel was being built.
It definitely could. I mean, that's not out of the question at all. But then again, the Eurotunnel does exist between Britain and France, and that seems to be about the same distance from the edge of the Eurasian plate as this tunnel would be from the North American and Pacific plates joining. So it might actually be feasible to conduct something like that and not see any sort of extreme damage caused to a tunnel like that. But this is still an absolutely harebrained idea. It makes no sense, rather than it being some sort of a Trojan horse offer to invade Alaska from, because there's no other way that would make sense. Also, we were able to hear that in the last meeting that was had, at least in Russia, of course, well, actually in Anchorage, I'm sorry, the Russians claim that Alaska is theirs, but we don't let that happen. But if they want to build a tunnel, we might be open to that idea. Still, Rinky Dink the Wise has returned, as Putin has actually apparently, according to some people who were involved in the meeting that the President of the United States had with Putin in Alaska, actually done the same crazy shit he did with Tucker with the president. So the Russian president then delivered a rambling historical discursion spanning medieval princes such as Rinky Dink the Wise of Novgorod and Yaroslav, along with the 17th century Cossack chieftain Bohdan Khmelnytsky, figures he often cites to support his claim Russia and Ukraine are one nation. Taken aback, the president raised his voice several times, as he is a big fan of history until it actually comes around, and at one point threatened to walk out. according to some people who were at the meeting. He ultimately cut the meeting short and canceled a planned lunch where broader delegations were due to discuss economic ties and cooperation because everyone got so tired of hearing about Rinky-Dink the Wise. So it does appear that Rinky-Dink the Wise is a legitimate thing that Putin brings up over and over, is that some guy from 1,000 years ago pulled some sword out of a swampy bog and some glimmering fairy told him that he was the leader of all the Russians or some stupid stuff. And Putin keeps on going around, even in legitimate meetings with the President of the United States, and brings up Rinky-Dink the Wise and his magical sword and how all the people in Europe are one and the same, at least in the eastern part of the country, or the eastern part of the continent more so. So a little bit wild with that one. I cannot believe that that's actually real, but it does appear that that is the case. Anyways, we're now going to be moving on back down into Washington because we do have to bullet point some stuff that came out of the Ukrainian-Russian meeting, or the Ukrainian-American meeting today. Sorry, everyone. I'm having a little bit of a slip there because I'm trying to make this smooth and seamless, and my mind is on the Russians and that stupid tunnel proposition that they have. Still, before we get into that, though, I also have to add in that we have heard some very interesting stuff. So strap into your seats, folks. I'm just going to cover it as it is. I'm not even really going to provide any of my own opinion on this whole deal today, but I'll just let y'all hear what happened and take it for what it is. So, moving on, first and foremost, the president has now stated that Ukraine and Russia should immediately stop at the current battle line, otherwise the deal could be too complicated. So what we're now saying is that the current front line that exists inside of Ukraine is where the war is going to stop. So Russia gets everything that's at the current battle line, and then Ukraine gets to keep everything else that hasn't been taken by the Russians. That was a statement made today. So moving on from that and into the rest of the statements that were made in Washington, D.C. over the course of the day, we also were able to hear that apparently the president has now backed off of the Tomahawk offer to the Ukrainians after meeting with Zelensky today. Apparently what was said was that Putin gave a phone call. It kind of seemed like a little neat, so now we're not going to be giving Ukraine Tomahawks, at least for now. Give it another 2 weeks. We have also been able to see that a statement was made by the President of the United States on Truth Social as well, which is the following. The meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine was very interesting and cordial, but I told him, as I likewise strongly suggested to President Putin, that it is time to stop the killing and make a deal. Enough blood has been shed, with property lines being defined by war and guts. They should stop where they are, let both claim victory, and let history decide. No more shooting, no more death, no more vast and unsustainable sums of money spent. This is a war that would have never started if I was the president. Thousands of people are being slaughtered each and every week. No more. Go to your families in peace. That was.
I have to point out, even though people can see this, I have to mention it just to put an emphasis on it. If they stop at the current fighting line, right now Russia holds a pretty significant portion of the eastern part of Ukraine. So if they stop there, that's not going to be a victory for Ukraine, obviously. Ukraine's going to basically be surrendering. So it would only be a victory for Russia. They're getting rewarded for invading and stealing land that wasn't theirs. So I don't understand. Like, once again, the priorities here are all mixed up. It seems like the U.S. is more concerned with getting a quick deal than they are actually getting a just deal for Ukraine. So I just don't get it. Also, by the way, the Groundhog Day syndrome is strong here. Like, it feels like we've been here 2 or 3 times just in the last year alone. So I just don't get it. And also, Zelensky was literally at the White House today, and the White House was trying to negotiate a deal to get Ukraine's drones. And meanwhile, today, the U.S. seems to be a little bit confused about where we stand in supporting Ukraine. So I just don't get it. We're still supplying weapons to Ukraine, by the way. That's a good thing. I would prefer that they get Tomahawks, but at least we haven't abandoned Ukraine. But we're also very, very confused about our strategy, very clearly.
Yeah, I would have to say, that's an interesting point to make. We also have some additional statements from the President of the United States. I had to add this one in as a bonus point, that the President of the United States today has stated that we flew the B-52s down to Venezuela. I would play the clip, but we're not for potential copyright reasons. But nevertheless, the President did say that we flew B-52 bombers down to Venezuela, and what's the coolest thing about them is that they're totally stealth. Nobody can see them anywhere on the planet, anytime, any place. Nobody could see them. Nobody even knew that they were there. It was like a gentle fart in the wind.
Pull up a picture of a B-52, by the way. That thing has like the cross section of a freaking like 50-story building. That thing's huge. This thing is not stealth. Like, this thing is anything but stealth. This thing's massive. It's loud and it's imposing. So he added a 5 where the 5 shouldn't have been. Not quite the same thing.
The B-52 Stratofortress, from what we understand, has a radar cross-section equivalent to the Titanic, the famed ocean liner that was ill-fated on on the deathly night of April 15th of 1912. This thing is certainly not stealth. This thing has been in service since about the time the current president of the United States was born, and also generally has been mostly phased out of nuclear service due to the fact that it is not stealth. So a little bit of an odd statement with that. And also, that's not like a misstatement, like, oh, he clearly meant B-2 bomber, because it literally was B-52s that flew down to Venezuela. So that was a legitimate statement. Just to make it clear, folks, really quickly, because we do have some people who come onto the stream and tell us that we clearly don't know as much about the military as the President of the United States. Getting the fact that the B-52 is not stealth is like fifth grader knowledge of the military. Like, everybody knows that the B-52 is not a stealth bomber. That's just something that's like by default known. And I also have to say, not like lobbing any additional insult, but this is the same guy who also said that battleships should return into naval service when they're clearly obsolete and have no place in the modern navy. So just to not trying to like make it clear that I have some aversion to these statements, but considering that these is like base knowledge, this sort of stuff does actually aggravate me a good bit, that these sorts of misstatements can just be made, and it's like some people go with whoopsie daisy, it's an innocent thing. It's like this is just like base level knowledge that's being gotten incorrectly. That annoys
Yeah, I would
me.
say the B-52 is about as stealth as Kim Jong-un tiptoeing to the Twinkie storehouse. This thing is literally as unstealth as it gets. Although I will say this, I will give credit, not trying to give a free pass here, because our government officials should know which planes they're talking about. It should be something that they know. But granted, it's pretty close. Like B-2, B-52, B-21, they're all in the same deal. Obviously, they start with a B, and they have a couple of numbers behind them. So maybe just got mixed up, maybe just misspoke. But at the same time, though, B-52, I mean, I personally wouldn't make that mistake, and I'm not like a military aircraft expert. So it is what it is.
I mean, yeah, I guess it is what it is. I mean, I guess if this thing is stealth, I've just been misinformed, folks. And who am I to go up against, who am I to go up against the President of the United States, the civilian commander-in-chief, the leader of the armed forces of the United States? I mean, if he says it's stealth, it's clearly got to be stealth. And also the stealth warships are ugly, by the way. They have to look cooler, just for that fact. It doesn't have to work, it just has to look cool. But anyways, moving on from that, and that whole deal, which was an interesting side note, it does appear that a lot of people have been talking in the meantime about the whole rinky-dink the wise, and how Putin keeps bringing up old rinky-dink at every single meeting that he's had with everyone everywhere on the earth. And a lot of people are wondering, why does he keep bringing up this stupid guy from 1,000 years ago, and why does he keep rambling about him? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so Putin's ramblings about history have become legendary. They've become notorious at this point. Sometimes he does it to the captive audience inside of Russia when he has a captive audience that can't really object to it. And he's also doing it with U.S. officials and anybody that he can get within earshot, basically. So Putin is going and doing this all the time. And he did it at the Alaska meeting and talked the president's head off, which is kind of wild and behind closed doors. So what does this say about Putin? And it looks like 44% said Putin has delusions of grandeur, and he believes he's the new Tsar of Russia, and he's rambling about the delusions he's having, which is about the history of the USSR and Russia. So 25% said Putin is simply trolling U.S. officials by talking their heads off, and 26% said Putin seems like he's probably crazy, and Unk has lost his mind. So I would say it seems like delusions of grandeur. It seems like Putin believes that he is some type of historical figure for Russia, and that's part of the reason why he invaded Ukraine. It's a personal thing for him, and he's rambling about history because he sees himself as those guys that he's talking about, which are historical Soviet figures. So I would say it's a mixture of crazy, a mixture of delusional, and the dude's just a lunatic. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd be with the 45%. This is just absolutely stupid. And I'm a really big person for history. I 100% am, and I can tell you all kinds of crazy historical facts and little tidbits, like people asking, how in the world do you know about the Alaska Railroad? I just read about everything, and will end up retaining the information somewhat well. But at the same time, folks, whipping out some historical figure from 1,000 years ago, or even thousands of years ago for that matter, in any general sense, and saying that some sect of land or some tract of land was promised to you thousands of years ago by some dude, that doesn't really work in the modern day. It just doesn't. It does not at all. Because that was 1,000 years ago that this guy was alive. And he's speaking particularly, I'll go back and make sure to get you all the specific guys that Putin talks about so dearly. He specifically talked about Rurik of Novgorod, which was a medieval prince of Nizhny Novgorod, and Yaroslav the Wise, who is kind of like the general founder of the Slavic peoples. A lot of people say he's Ukrainian, the Russians say he's Russian. It's really up to you who the hell the guy is. But beyond that, these guys were alive 1,000 years ago. These guys were literally alive in the 10th century AD. And so it is absolutely insane to go, yes, I am owed land because of some stupid stuff that happened 1,000 years ago. Because while history is so important, at the same time, everything that happened 1,000 years ago doesn't even apply today. If that is the case, what if we go back in Putin's familial ancestral records and find out that 1,000 years ago, he was not of noble birth and noble descent inside of any of the princely states of Russia, and therefore, for that matter, he cannot be the president of Russia today because he clearly was not of noble birth 1,000 years ago under the same premise. You could literally go through all of history and justify anything and everything off of what existed over the past several thousand years. Britain could claim that they should own about a half of modern-day France, because back in the 100 Years' War, they actually owned large parts of what's modern-day France. The Germans could claim, well, everyone could claim that the Federal Republic of Germany shouldn't exist, because 600, 700 years ago, it was the Holy Roman Empire, and was comprised of hundreds of princely states about the size of a village each. We could go back several thousand years ago and say that Italy should be controlling pretty much all of Europe from Rome, because it was once the seat of all power inside of most of Europe under the Roman Empire. You could go back and make all kinds of stupid claims. We live in the modern day and age, which has evolved 1,000 years later into a whole bunch of different instances of treaties and historical events that have led to the world that we live in today. This whole idea that Putin is now going to be the next Rinky-Dink the Wise is an absolutely stupid premise, because he has no connection to Rinky-Dink the Wise. This was 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, honestly, though, I'll say he's living up to the USSR image that he wants to appeal to. Like, he's really living up to that fantastically, because under the USSR, there were gas lines. Putin has accomplished that feat himself with no help from the outside whatsoever. And also, the entire economy is going to hell and back, which is what happened right before the USSR fell. So he's truly, he's role-playing really, really well. He's really doing a great job as the Tsar of Russia. And all I got to say is keep it up, buddy, because if it keeps up like this, there won't be an empire left in another year or so.
Dude, Putin is out here literally LARPing as some sort of a medieval prince in his mind. Like, it's absolutely insane. Like, this guy is legitimately nuts. This guy is absolutely stupid. Like, I don't even understand how this guy can unironically yap like that about some guy from 1,000 years ago. Because you know what's crazy, folks? This is something that's actually crazy, and I'll tell you all about here. In Matthew and my family lineage, literally 1,000 years ago, in the same historical period as Putin rambles about, the first person in our family that carried our family's name was actually a king in North Wales. So does that give Enforcer Matt and me the claim that we are actually descendants of the great Blednab Sinfin, and that we actually have a legitimate land claim and holding to all of Northern Wales? No, that is absolutely stupid. 1,000 years have passed since then. We're not even like that wouldn't even make any sense. That would be legitimately insane to even make a claim like that. And yet this guy is actually leading a country that has 6,000 nuclear weapons on paper, and also is in an active war, and is threatening pretty much a larger war with NATO at the moment, and this guy's yapping about some guy from 1,000 years ago and why he's pretty much like that guy. This is just stupid. It absolutely makes no sense. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that well. And before we move on into the rest of the news, because we still have a lot of crazy stuff to go over tonight, we do want to make sure to get a couple of questions, because there has actually been a large amount of questions that we have in the chat tonight. We want to make sure to get to just a couple of them before we move on into the rest of the news. So, Matthew, what do we got?
I must say, the Cultimat, it's proper Welsh. They say proper Welsh. They must admit right there from the kings of Wales and things like that. Got to admit the kings of Wales. But anyways, moving on to our first super chat of the night. We're going to grab three and then get right back to the news. Our first one is a very generous $200 donation from Nicholas Wismer, and thank you very much, Nicholas, for that extremely generous support right there. And that is the largest super chat of the night, and we do appreciate that. He said, "Happy Friday, LSA, and let's go."
Hey, let's go, LSA. And it's a Friday, folks. It is a Friday. A crazy Friday at that. And I'm going to say a humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running, Nicholas. And I've got to say, it's a wonderful thing to know that you love the LSA, because the LSA will never die thanks to folks like you who go out of their way to support this channel and to help us to keep this thing running. So a tremendous, humongous thanks to you so much once again for that incredible support and helping this channel to keep being possible. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And also, crazily enough, folks, I think this is hilarious. There are actually a lot of people in support of Enforcer Matt and me going over to Britain and reclaiming Wales as like some sort of a kingdom. I know y'all are joking about that. It's really funny though. And I keep seeing in the chat, and I'm like, this is wild. Like, there are a load of people who are like, yes, take back Wales, return it to its former glory. Honestly, if like let's say we ever did get put in a position like that, I would pretty much just have it run like a constitutional monarchy with a parliament. And while there would be like some power that I would hold if I was in that position, I would still have enough benevolence to just let it pretty much run itself as efficiently as possible. That would pretty much be what I would do. But I actually hear that y'all pretty much have your own leader in the United Kingdom these days, and they're kind of running it a little bit more heavy-handed. So I'll let y'all figure out what y'all like over there. You know, like sounds interesting. You know, do what y'all do. Y'all do what y'all want over there and all that. But you know, anyways.
Honestly, you sound like you have delusions of grandeur, like you're like the good old bastard Putin these days. Honestly, that's honestly what Putin said. He said, well, Putin said, I'm from Wales. I'll just go invade Wales. That's what he did to Ukraine, basically. He said, oh, my father fought in those wars near Ukraine and around Ukraine, so I'll just go back and take it because, you know, he's getting up in the ages. He's getting pretty old. So I guess he said before he goes out, he's going to retake the empire, I guess you could say.
Man, dude, he said, man, like, if we were him, we would sit there and tell all of y'all about, have you ever heard of Blednev Simfin, King of Gwynedd and Powys, the founder of the princely house of Metrofol, and his great conquests against William the Bastard in 1065 to 1066? I bet you haven't. I bet you haven't.
I'll tell you what, the history books better put Putin down as, you know, how they all have, you know, Ivan the Terrible or somebody the something. Like, that's the whole thing. That's the whole moniker that they put on people. I insist it must be Putin the Bastard. Like, it has to be. It has to be that. The history books have to have him in there as that. Now, if the U.S. cuts him a deal and says, oh, okay, you can just keep that part of Ukraine you've already taken, he won't be known as Putin the Bastard. But if he gets defeated or gets ousted, then he can get the name.
You know something that's actually crazy, Matthew? It just snapped in my mind there for a second. I just realized this. You know, history back then was so propagandized because people would get names like that and it would legitimately stick, like Richard the Lionheart, William the Bastard, and then once he killed King Harold in England, then everyone didn't want to go with the whole bastard thing because it wasn't cool anymore, so then they called him William the Conqueror so that way they didn't get killed. You know, like that whole deal. It's like there's really a lot of propaganda back then in the medieval naming system because you just got like a name stuck to you and it just like stuck forever.
Yeah, honestly, really. I'm glad it doesn't work like that today. Otherwise, we'd have a bunch of enemies of the channel that are running around. We'd be calling them Hot Dog the Terrible and things like that. So they better be glad that naming convention went by the wayside.
Hot Dog the Loser. It's like Frosty the Snowman. Like, but anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that. Well, humongous thanks to you for the massive support once again and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our second super chat goes to KB Kuntash. And thank you very much, KB, for that extremely generous $100 support. Another massive support tonight. And we do appreciate that, KB. And KB said, when do you expect to be up and running at the new Enforcer location? And to give you a quick little overview, here's our current estimates. So let me grab my calendar real quick so I can tell you. I'm expecting to have the first short war video out in Utah by, it should be the 1st of November. That will be the earliest short war video that we have. So that'll be the first short war day. And then we're hoping to run our first stream on the 2nd, I believe, or maybe the 3rd. 3rd. So we're hoping earlier than that, but right now that's the tentative dates that we're going for because we have to get moved in, and that's a very long drive, and it's a whole thing. So we are putting the pedal to the metal to get that done as quick as possible, but we can only go so fast. And also, hopefully the weather isn't crazy either, like no snowstorms or anything like that. Hopefully not. But Enforcer, what say you?
And that is our current timetable. So, folks, just to put this out there, from the 27th of October to the 31st of October, there will be no videos and no live streams, unfortunately, during that period, because we are going to be traveling across the entire United States to set up the new HQ 3.0, which is going to be in Salt Lake City. So, it is going to be a little bit before we can get back on air. It's not going to be incredibly long, though, because a Monday is included in that timetable. So it won't be exceptionally long, but it still will be long enough for a lot of people to go into enforcer withdrawals, unfortunately. But we will be back on air as quickly as we can. The first thing that we're both doing as soon as we get there is, instead of unloading or unpacking furniture or anything else, pretty much the number one priority is to set up our studios and get those back up and running. So that should be done quickly enough that we will be back on air very soon after the 31st. Hopefully on the 1st of November, as a matter of fact, we'll be back on air, I would hope. But we'll have to see how everything works in between, because there might be a little bit of a variance with that. It might start back on the 2nd, but I'm generally expecting that we'll be back up on the 1st. But a humongous thanks to you so much for the massive support and help with this channel to keep running, and also reminding us to put that timetable out there to all of y'all who are watching right now, that there will be some downtime here in the future for the channel as we move the HQs. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. A humongous thanks to you so much once again for support. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on to the final question of this segment and then get on into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one goes to none other than Brian Justin, who puts in a 50 as well. And thank you very much, Brian, for that $50 support. And he said, just a few monies to help with the move to HQ 3.0, and spent several weeks for a day job in Salt Lake, but can't talk about it. And take one from the chat. And Brian, there's only a couple places you could be working at your day job if it's something that I believe it is. There's only about 2 or 3 places it could be. So I have a very strong idea, but I won't get into it because I don't want to have to put you on the spot. But thank you very much, Brian, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support, Brian Justin. And I gotta say, Salt Lake City, I'm glad to hear that you did enjoy your time in Salt Lake City. I'd hope. But still, I gotta thank you so much for the support, Brian Justin, and helping this channel to keep it running, because Salt Lake City is a really cool place, a magical place, filled with magical charms, like all the mountains off to the east, or all the mountains off to the west, or this Bingham Canyon mine here to the west, or down here in Utah Lake down here to the south, or further up to the north, the Great Salt Lake in Ogden in Promontory, which is something I want to eventually see myself. There are all kinds of cool and interesting things out here, and I've got to say, I cannot wait to get out here and set up the HQ. It's definitely going to be a change of pace. There is going to be more to do. It's going to be prettier. And also, I would hope that on the statistical average of when we run into people, they're going to be a little bit nicer. We had to go to the store today on a grocery run, and I'm not going to say the specific store, but the amount of rude people there, and this is like a standard around here, it's just unbelievably large. And there are nice people in Alabama. I want to make that clear. Everyone here isn't a bad person. But at the same time, there are just so many rude and uncaring people here. It's truly insane. And from what I've known, and from what everyone has said going out really just into the West Coast in general, people are generally nicer out there the closer you get to the West Coast than they are down here in the Southeast. People are just angry. A lot of people are just angry down here in the Southeast. Have no idea why, but they make it their whole life's passion. But anyways, and someone said it must be Walmart. Actually, no, it was a bit more of a higher end deal. But we were walking into the store. This is our whole experience and how it started off today. We're walking into this grocery store, and we're walking through the little crosswalk spot, folks like to get into the door into the store. And so a car stops for us, and this woman comes out with one shopping bag or something like that, and sits there and walks right towards the car, like everyone's got to move out of her way, stops, and as we're walking in front of the car, she starts yelling at the car, "Go on, move!" We're literally not walking in front of it, right in front of her, where she can see us as well. And I was about to say, actually, on second thought, don't move, man. Just stay right there. Let her walk around. But it's that kind of stuff. That's literally how it started. And then through the whole trip through the store, there's just rude people like that everywhere. It's just crazy. But anyways, with that, I hope that is addressed to the best we can. Big thanks to you once again, and hopefully we'll have a great time in Salt Lake City. But with that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of our news, because we still have a lot of news to cover from around the entirety of the world. And it's time for us to start moving on into the Indian subcontinent and Central Asia, technically. Moving us into New Delhi, we were able to hear that apparently, according to the Indian government, they've claimed that the Prime Minister Modi did not assure the President of the United States that they would no longer purchase Russian oil after the president claimed that they did, according to the New York Times. Not long after that, we then heard, according to Nexta, that apparently the Indians are now buying 4 million barrels of oil from Guyana through a U.S. company, ExxonMobil. With deliveries said to begin in early 2026. So now we do not know what is true. It appears that according to this, they are actually buying American oil, or at least through an American company. But then at the same time, the Indians are also saying that they've never made any such promise. So we really do not know which one it even is at this point. But the situation continues to get more confusing. So we'll try and figure out why that's the case and what the real answer is here. But the plot thickens on that one for now. In the meantime, in between Afghanistan and Pakistan, the ceasefire ended with a bit of a bang. The Taliban conducted a kamikaze drone attack on the Pakistanis. Here's the clip. We're going to be ending that clip there and just showing the images, but you can hear firefights and also the plume of the explosion rising over the area after the Afghans broke the ceasefire 8 hours before it was supposed to end. Not long after that, we did hear of further clashes within the area of the region of Zazai Ayub Karam, as Pakistan and Afghanistan started to duke it out in that area, and we also got to see that the Taliban were continuing to move more forces into the area of the border. We can see that in this clip here, as a significant Taliban convoy started to move into the area. We then also heard additional news further on down the border that a Pakistani helicopter was spotted very close to the border. You can see that right there. We will not be able to show the full clip, but you can see the helicopter, which is actually a French-made Alouette helicopter. We also were able to see more Pakistani forces moving towards the border, which we can see in this clip. We can actually see that these folks are playing cricket out here. That is a cricket bat, as significant artillery pieces move on in the background. That guy just threw an absolute haymaker of a ball right there in that cricket game. Look at this. Yeah, like, bro. Oh, look at that, the crickets.
We got cricket game out here. I tell you what, all the crickets.
But yeah, that is a Pakistani artillery battery moving towards the border. A little wild.
That's a lot of vehicles, too. Also, by the way, you got a couple of personal vehicles in the mix too. Oh, look, a tuk-tuk also in the mix.
Man, I gotta say, that is quite interesting to see right there. A tuk-tuk of all vehicles. We also saw further on down the border, towards the area of Ungur Ada, that there were apparently airstrikes inside of Afghanistan, inside of the Paktika province of Afghanistan, which is within this area right here along the border. We also heard of drones being spotted in the area of the Kandahar province as well, which is generally showing us that the war is back. With a bit of a vengeance. We also heard, according to the Pakistani Ministry of Defense, the following statement. No more demarques, peace appeals, or delegations to Kabul. Every terror attack in Pakistan will be replied at its origin source in Afghanistan. Making it incredibly clear, finally, that the Pakistanis are actually slamming the Taliban because of the whole Balochistan independence terrorist group that's operating in Balochistan. So that is apparently the statement from the Pakistan Defense Ministry as of today, and clarifying that this actually is about the Balochistan terrorist groups, which had been a bit questionable up until now as to why this was going on. Now they've made it clear it is about the Balochistan terrorists. So with that in mind, a lot of people are wondering where this whole thing's going to go from here. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like that 48-hour ceasefire, it didn't even last the full 48 hours. It literally was broken before, I think it was literally 3 or 4 hours before the ceasefire was actually set to end. It looked like one of the sides broke it. I can't even tell if it's the Afghans or the Pakistanis that broke it. I would say, based on my speculation, it looks like that attack that the Afghans conducted likely broke it. So how is this going to end now that both sides are armed to the teeth and they are ready to go and they are clearly attacking each other literally right now? So 52% 40% said it's going to end in an Afghan defeat, while 32% said it will end in a brokered peace deal, and 4% said it will end in a Pakistani defeat. So right now, the only thing that's very clear is neither side really wants to end this thing. It looks like Pakistan is making some very bold statements that they are going to basically return the hurt on the Afghanis, and the Afghanis are sending tons of equipment to the border. So I personally see this going for quite some time. I'm not sure if this is going to end anytime soon, and it's really an odd conflict. I was not expecting it, and I'm really not sure where this is going to go. So I'm going to assume that it might end possibly in an Afghan defeat, but that's a tough one. It might end in a brokered peace deal, because don't forget, the U.S. is currently on a mission of peace right now at all costs, and this is a very juicy opportunity right here for another ceasefire agreement. So the U.S. might be about to jump right in the middle of this, and they might be raring to go to get right in the middle of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd just say it's highly likely, especially if this remains on the conventional level, that this is going to end in a Taliban defeat. Highly likely. I would have to be with the 53%. As long as Pakistan doesn't invade Afghanistan and attempt to occupy it like we did, and as long as they just engage the Taliban conventionally, they will end up winning. Well, you can already tell that before the ceasefire began, the Pakistanis were pretty much in clear control of the entire situation, and I would say that they're most likely going to remain entirely in control of the situation well after the ceasefire has now been broken. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, we've been able to hear that a little war is going to be returning to the Gaza Strip. I can already tell you all that today, because according to information that's been received by Reuters today, a senior Hamas official, Mohammed Nazal, says the group intends to maintain security control in Gaza during a transitional phase and cannot commit to disarming. Which this was a very big part of the ceasefire agreement that was just made recently. When asked if Hamas would give up its arms, Nazal said the following: "I can't answer with a yes or no. It depends on the project. What does disarmament mean? To whom will the weapons be handed over?" So basically saying that they don't even agree with the ceasefire they just signed. So we know that the Israelis will invade the Gaza Strip again here in the near future, and that whole thing will continue on once again. This is pretty much the very reason that Israel would go in there over again, is because they are now quite truly showing that they are not going to follow the ceasefire agreement they just signed. So the Israelis did get the hostages back. That is a plus. So there's no living hostages left in any Hamas control. But at the same time, they're also saying that they're not going to give up control of their weapons, and they're also going to continue to pretty much run the Gaza Strip during the quote-unquote transitional period, meaning that there is going to be no transition, and once Gaza exits the transitional period, it'll still be operating controlled by Hamas. Shocking, to say the least. I couldn't have ever seen that one coming, so I guess they're going to be back into the fray of things here soon. Moving on from that, and on up into Europe, we've also gotten some fairly interesting news from this area. Estonia has permanently closed all of their border crossings with the Russians today. So it does appear that that is an ongoing development. We also have been able to hear in the area of Moscow that there has been some occurrences within this area. Drone occurrences.
Oh, sounds like the mosquitoes. It's that time of year.
Oh,
Вспышка.
Big mosquito.
oh. A brand new car alarm. It sounds like a bird. Well, guess that was a confirmed hit in Moscow, I suppose. Let's get another one.
Oh, a swarm of mosquitoes. Haunting. Honestly, it has a nice sound to it. It sounds like music.
It has a nice ring to it.
There's nothing like jets.
I'm not gonna lie, man. There's just nothing like jets, really. You know, jets are just amazing. It's clearly like not a new weapon has emerged. You know. Anyways, moving on from that and on into the area of Sterlitamak in the Ural Mountains, or the foothills of the Urals. We also saw that there was another unfortunate travesty that's hit Russia today. The Ukrainians have hit and knocked out the Russian Avangard chemical plant, which is incredibly important to the Russian war effort. There's the hit.
Oh.
That was a pretty big one, actually.
And that was a drone that hit it?
Yes.
Damn, that was a very big hit.
From what we know, it's a major Russian ammunition production hub under Rostec, handling both manufacture and disposal. Let's take another look at that hit. Oh, well, fire came out of it.
Здесь на дежурстве. Лишь бы осколки никакие не полетели.
Oh, some air defense fire. Oh, buddy. Well, appears that the avant-garde's down and out for the count. So we'll have to see how that affects Russia here in the next 2 months. Also, they have declared a NOTAM over the entirety of the Kasputin Yar testing range within this area of southern Russia. So we will have to see what comes out of that, because this has been declared from the 18th to the 21st of October. In the meantime, down in occupied Crimea, the Ukrainians also hit a incredibly important oil depot and did set it alight today. And we also heard that possibly a Russian Su-30SM fighter jet was shot down during air defense over the peninsula during that period of time. We do not have 100% confirmation on that, but we are trying to find some. So, moving on from that and out of the occupied regions of Ukraine, it's now time for us to move on into our location unknowns. First, we were able to see a Ukrainian Mirage 2000 conducting a little interception. There's the Mirage 2000. In a second, it's about to fire off its missile. Any second now. We cannot see the Mirage or the missile. We can now hear the missile firing. And we can hear the interception. Ooh. We didn't get to see any of that. It was all in cloud cover, which is a shame, but really cool to see the Mirage 2000s being used. We also got to see that the Russians, when running out of gas, are not phased, as they just use literal manpower to push the tanks once the gas runs out.
Убираем, эвакуация, нахуй, 272, блядь.
Oh, look, it's the Russian Hood Council.
So what is this called, Matthew? Is this still horsepower or what?
Yes, you have vodka power, I guess you could say. Powered by vodka.
You know, actually, Matthew, I think that was a bad joke. Horsepower really doesn't work in this scenario. That would only work if it was like 30 Lavrovs pushing this thing.
Man, one big horsepower, man, I'll tell you what.
Man, bro, Lavrov will be out here going, I'm the biggest horse, I'm the biggest horse. Like that song, like the biggest bird. But anyways, they got that thing on its way.
Конечно, и мне же отчитаться надо перед командиром.
Also, it's kind of impressive they're able to push that.
It kind of is.
Вот они, блядь, пехота 272, блядь, рыксено.
Well, I guess as long as the Russians have manpower, they can get the armor moving. Just hope and pray that no one sprays that down with a machine gun if they actually get into combat, because then manpower is going to disappear pretty quickly. Anyways, we also got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and it was...
They got one Bobcat skid steer. It's been ages since it's been this time. It's been ages, but I'm glad to see it back because I love special equipment. I love it so. But Enforcer, tell us more.
We love special equipment. We love the Bobcat skid steers. And Miss DC Keeper of the Records has the additional notes to follow. 588 drones shot down is the second highest daily loss, and 730 APs, well, 730 personnel is a low not seen since April 22nd of 2024, about a year and a half ago, which is quite interesting to note. But over the past 24 hours, the Russians have lost 730 troops wounded and killed, along with 10 APCs, 73 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 35 artillery pieces, 588 drones, 5 cruise missiles, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. In general, it does appear that the Russians are not doing as badly, at least in manpower losses today, but in most of the other losses, it appears they're doing fairly average. Moving on from that and down into the only bits of frontline news I was able to find today. For one, we were able to see a mortar crew of the 225th Assault Regiment at work defending itself from a Russian drone attack as they were moving mortar positions. We see them firing at the incoming drone. Of course, it's a little bumpy, so the aim is not perfectly accurate. But you see them.
If he can hit that drone using a rifle and bouncing around like that, also that's a nice rifle, by the way. That's a nice M4. It looks like.
Man, that thing is nice, really. Very swell.
He's got a vertical foregrip on the thing. He's got some really nice iron sights, and also he's flagged the back of the guy's head viciously.
Well, Mandy, we can't judge. we can't be judgy like that. Oh, and they're all hopping back in the truck. And now they're getting on their way for another adventure.
What the hell kind of Ford is this? Max Runner? I've never heard of that.
It's probably one of those export models, honestly.
Yeah, that's weird. I also saw the Ford badge was in a weird spot on the tailgate. That was kind of an odd thing. I've never seen a Ford like that.
Yeah, I've never seen one either like that. Also, in Mirnograd, which is a suburb of Pokrovsk, we were able to see some fairly significant battles in the area today filmed by a drone. As you can see, the smoke is pretty much obscuring the current battlefield where it lies. We can see the city of Mirnograd below.
Oh,
Quite a large fire, really. A rather interesting development there.
wow.
I mean, that thing is cooking. I mean, someone needs to whip out some marshmallows and start roasting them on this fire here.
That is a fire.
That is a fire. Of course, Mirnograd has been heavily damaged due to the heavy fighting that's existed in the Battle of Pokrovsk for about a year at this point, and this is a little glimpse of what it currently looks like today. Still, it's a bit of a silver lining because it does show the Ukrainians are holding. Otherwise, this area would have taken very little damage because there wouldn't have hardly been a battle to be conducted here. So, while the fire and the damage is, of course, unfortunate to see, it is a silver lining in one form or another. But moving on out of our clips from the front lines, we have also been able to see some people talking about the whole thing I said a while ago about you can't make claims off of stuff from a couple of thousand years ago and say that that is the reason why you should have some form of land today. And then some people are saying, well, what about Israel? Israel has the land it has today not for any other reason rather than the past 130 years of history. There's no other purpose that they have that land today than for that reason. And that's something that a lot of people don't really get. It has nothing to do, like people make it out today, to have anything to do with religion, whether it's Islamic or Judaism or anything along those lines. It has to do with the fact that during the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans sold tons of lands in the area around modern-day Tel Aviv to what it is now the modern-day Israelis, and because of that, there was a whole bunch of tensions that existed between the Jews moving in the area and the Islamic peoples that had been living in the area, and that then boiled over. The British then took control of the Palestine Mandate, as it was called, the Palestine Province under the Ottoman Empire, so the name was just carried over under British control as a mandate, and then the mandate stated that I believe it was around 30 years after that time, so that would set it in 1947, that the mandate would be released into some form of an independent country. The British then decided, in their judgment, along with the United Nations after World War II in 1946, that the land would be partitioned 50-50 between the Jews, or the Israelis as they're now called these days, and the Islamic peoples, the Palestinians, if you want to call them that also were within the area as well, considering that the population split within the region at that time at least was pretty much 50-50. Then nobody in the region accepted that. The Egyptians didn't accept that. The Saudis didn't accept that. The Jordanians didn't accept that. The Syrians didn't accept that. And I also believe the Lebanese didn't accept that, which is what created the 1948 Israeli Independence War, or the Arab-Israeli War as it's called by others. The Israelis ended up winning that, and as a result of that, the Palestinians ended up losing additional lands that they had because of the 1947 UN partition. The reason that is the reason why Israel exists today. That's the reason why they are a country. I don't get into the whole other deal that people get into about this and that from like 3,000 years ago, or this and that from 1,000 years ago says this or that. That has no impact on what exists in the modern day and age at all. That may as well be fairy tales at this point with how modern foreign policy works. The Israelis have the land because back in the day, the people who created Israel bought up the land legally under the Ottoman Empire, and then in the 1940s, when it was attempted to be partitioned fairly half and half in between the two sides, the Palestinians really didn't like that idea, and then tried to move forward with just taking over the entire area, and then either forcing the Israelis out or just genociding them again, one or the other. So that's the reason why that exists in the form it does today. So moving on from that, that is actually all of the news that we have for the day. We actually do not have a speech from Zelensky. Zelensky was once again here in the United States of America, so we unfortunately didn't really get to cover much of what he wanted to say today, because he really didn't have anything to say today, at least as far as a speech. But that is going to be moving us on into the second segment of this stream, which is where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, we have tons and tons to talk about. And I've got to say that it is quite an interesting and incredible thing that we have made it through another news night with all of y'all. And we are, of course, going to be making sure to answer every single super chat and as many live chats as we can throughout the course of the night. But before we get into all of that, I understand that we actually have one last poll, because there's been an interesting comment that was made by U.S. officials today, and some people are weighing in on that. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So to lay out this poll right now, we did hear statements from U.S. officials today, specifically one very important U.S. official that suggested that there's nothing like jets when asked about Ukrainian drones. So what are your thoughts about that sentiment? It looks like 37% said jets are good, but not best when it comes to drone defense. 29% said jets are ineffective against drones, and 26% said jets are still superior, and I agree. And the main argument, the main piece of evidence that was used today by the U.S. official that said this was the whole situation that happened between Iran and Israel. And when Iran launched a lot of Shahed drones at Israel's Iron Dome system, the F-16 jets, which are operated by the U.S. Air Force, came into the area and started shooting down these drones one by one using the munitions mounted on the F-16s. So I would say this. It was a good supplement to the Iron Dome system and also the David Sling system that shoots down incoming projectiles that are fired at Israel. However, the cost of operating the F-16 and also firing projectiles at these drones are highly cost ineffective, extremely badly. It's a very bad return on investment. So the jets, if you're taking the economic side of it into effect, I would say jets are largely ineffective against drones because you would quickly go broke very fast if your only drone defense were F-16s. It costs way too much money to operate the F-16 against a very cheap Shahed drone. So I would say personally, in my opinion, the jets are good as a last resort, but you need some type of dedicated drone defense system that's on the ground to defend against drones that is cost effective. If you don't have that, then you're at a major disadvantage. So there's nothing like jets in some applications, but not when it comes to drones. We need to change that quickly in the United States because we're behind the curve, and miscalculating on the drone situation, that could cost the country an entire war if we don't get that right, in my personal opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with the 37%. Jets are good, but they're not great in every scenario, and it's once again a complete misunderstanding of the situation that the president made the statement on. I had to be honest with y'all, getting military information or any analysis from the president is like getting financial information from a homeless guy. Like, it's probably not going to be the greatest information at this point, because we've seen, like, this isn't anything that's even up to conjecture. This is just a blatant fact at this point, that drone warfare is the next step in modern warfare evolution. There's no other way to look at it. It's like back in the day, someone in Britain going, "Oh yes, the machine gun. Oh yes, heaven's very efficient system, but nothing will ever beat the old-fashioned line formation and just firing at the enemy and a nice giant line." That's like the same sort of a mindset in the modern day. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Jets are quite efficient and also incredibly important in their own way. But in the modern war, drone warfare fills a role that conventional aircraft just can't, especially for the cost effectiveness of it. And so I would have to say that jets are good in some scenarios, but not in every scenario, and drone warfare is clearly proving to be the future of all warfare at this point, in almost every single facet. So I hope that does address that the best I can at this point, because, I mean, going off of that kind of a sense right there, hell, I mean, that's not one to get wrong lightly. That's one to be so overconfident in and get wrong that it could end up costing us the war. Because the Russians at the beginning of the war in Ukraine counted entirely on their air force. Look how that's panned out for them. Not too well. They're on the losing side of the war, and they were very slow to develop the drone side of the warfare, and now they're paying dearly for that in spades, because the Ukrainians were the first ones to innovate in that in this conflict and have shown that that's certainly the way forward. I mean, hell, you can destroy destroy an air force with drones with an Operation Spiderweb type action or something along those lines. You don't even have to really even have an air force or a navy at this point, thanks to drone warfare, and it also is pennies to the dollar compared to the conventional cost of fielding an air force or even a navy for that matter. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And also, one other thing, saw some people saying this, so I want to address this really quickly. For some reason, people took my statement a while ago as bashing religion. Don't really know how. But the statement I'm making about the Israelis is to say that because, like I don't know if y'all know the history of the whole thing with Israel, but Israel was not going to exist where Israel is now until someone decided that it was cheaper to buy land there than it was in Argentina. If you don't know, the whole reason Israel exists is because there was this movement in the late 1800s amongst Jewish people in Europe called Zionism, which is this idea that the Jews would eventually create their own independent state from everyone else. So at that time, a lot of the major Zionist thinkers in Europe came up with two different ideas of where they would eventually create this new Jewish state, which is going to be called Israel either way. It was either going to be created in Argentina or it was going to be created in the Ottoman Empire in the Palestine province. Had nothing to do with the historical connection that the Israelis once were from there. They then decided on moving this attempted Jewish state or like semi-autonomous state to Palestine, the Palestine province inside the Ottoman Empire, because it turns out that at the last minute when they made the decision, the land was cheaper there, and so they could get more land and move more people in there than they could Argentina, and so that's why they went there. It was almost going to be in Argentina. So for some people who were saying, oh, well, this one's special because it is connected to this and that religiously, that doesn't really even have any impact historically on the decision that they made. It was all about the price of land per acre that they could get either inside of Argentina or in the Palestine province in the Ottoman Empire, and so they went there instead. If you don't believe me, you can just go research the history on that. That's literally the reason why they went there. So, that's something that I could tell you with a good bit of certainty there. And also on top of that, with how it works these days, the reason why there is even a debate between what exists, is it all Palestine's or Israel's, is because the United Nations in 1947 approved the partition that gave 50% of the land to the Palestinians and 50% to the Israelis. So even beyond all that, that's where we're at today. That's why this is here at the moment, and that's what we're working from. I'm sorry if people don't like that, but that's just how it actually works. That's how it worked. That's where we're at. That's why we're here. So, if you don't like that, I'm sorry. There's not really a lot I can do. But anyways, with that, we are on to the questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving on to our questions here. Our first super chat is going to go to none other than Mark Ead. And Mark puts in a $50 support, and thank you very much, Mark, for that support as well. He said, another monthly subscription from Pleasant Point, New Zealand, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. All the way from Pleasant Point in New Zealand. And where in the world is Pleasant Point? Let's see, Pleasant Point. Can we find that? Here we are. And where is that? Oh, right here in the middle of the South Island. That's pretty cool, actually. And let's take a look at that. Oh, they have a train station. I respect that greatly. They have a train station here in Pleasant Point. And where is that? It looks like it's the end of the line, as a matter of fact. To what? To what, I say? It's like some sort of a historic railroad, apparently, I'm guessing. But that is a pretty cool little spot right there. And let's take a look at the outskirts of town. Oh, this actually kind of looks like Wales a good bit. So I gotta say, very interesting. I gotta thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, all the way out in Pleasant Point in New Zealand, in the South Island. And I gotta thank you incredibly for that support, because folks like you help us to keep this channel running, and help us to keep doing what we've been doing for years now, for years. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bobby43, also known as LC39A. And he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, good sir, for that $50 support as well. And he said, hi, guys. And hello there, Bobby. Hello.
And hello, Bobby. Good to see you again tonight. And a huge thanks for the incredible support. You're helping the channel to keep turning and burning. And I got to thank you incredibly for once again being here with us tonight. A big hello to you, and I hope you've been enjoying the show tonight. Well, and so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that I was addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, before we move on to our next super chat question, I see a lot of people, they are getting very hyped because it looks like our RQ-4B Global Hawk is on the move. It looks like Forte 10, which is the old regular here on Flight Radar 24, is currently making a pass near the Polish-Ukrainian border, and it's currently passing Rezhal, which is where they stage equipment going to Ukraine. So, Enforcer, if you want to hop on Flight Radar 24 real quick, we can show the people this flight path of Forte 10. The Global Hawk flying through. It looks like people are very interested about what it's doing.
And let's try and take a look here if we can find Forte 10. And here it is. It's Forte 10. And we'll only show this for a brief moment before the ads turn on because I still don't have a premium because we hardly use this thing. But still, there it is. And it's been flying currently from southern Italy near to the area of Syracuse and has flown all the way up the NATO border and is currently passing by Ukraine at this moment. So very interesting to see. And we will make sure to keep an eye on that and see what kind of a surveillance path it's flying throughout the rest of the night tomorrow. But still, I hope that does address that well. Fairly interesting development there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Celix the Fat, and he puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, good sir Celix, for that very generous support. And he said, I always say salad fun, but it's always filled with meaning. And I first met this channel 3 years ago when I was trucking polyethylene sheets to Ukraine in the first winter of the war when Russia was sure that they would freeze and surrender.
And I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, Celix the Fat. And I gotta say a huge thanks to you for the salad fund. You always throw in the salad fund, but we're always appreciative of the salad fund. I myself, I need to really start eating some salads, to be entirely honest with you. But still, a huge thanks to you for the support. And it's really crazy to think, Celix, how long folks like you and a lot of other people have been around here on this channel for years now. We've been doing this for 1,332 days. And folks like BC Scammon has been with us for every day of that except for 4 at the beginning of the whole war. And I gotta say, it's a really crazy thing to know that folks like you were still around with us, still enjoying the news, and also supporting this channel so that we can keep this thing rolling and make this thing a reality every single day. And so with that, I gotta say, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to make it through that winter and many more winters up until this point. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here, also, by the way, Robert Krogan said that Costco chicken will get you. Honestly, I love that Costco chicken. That Costco chicken. They say there's no better chicken than that Costco chicken. I got to say, they're actually right. I like that chicken a lot. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, this one also goes to Celix the Fat yet again. He throws in a second $50 support. And thank you very much, Celix, once again for that support. He said, in my mind, there is no justification for the brutality that I saw. And coming back, yours were the only voices even close to the truth. And 3 years now into our journey, and you were always the ones that spoke true. Oh, thank you very much, Celix, for that, by the way. That's very high praise. And I'm glad to see that we hit the mark right there because we used to really be talking to a lot of people that were in Ukraine that were telling us what was going on over there. And also, obviously, we spoke to some soldiers over there as well. And the situation is as bad as it looks for the war crime situation. So the brutality off the charts. The Russians are literally committing pretty much every war crime you could possibly commit. And now they're even filming it. For example, striking the UN convoys. They're even filming it and uploading it to the internet, which shows you that must happen a lot more than we even see. Because for them to upload that, that means they've gotten extremely brazen. So a lot of brutality. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say a huge thanks to you for the support again, Celix. Massive support tonight. And it is a crazy thing to think that back then all that stuff was coming out fresh, because the war crime news, especially out of Bucha Hospital in Irpin, which was really the first place that anyone was able to confirm the war crimes, that happened way back in April and May of 2022. A long time ago. And it's really crazy to think that way back then we were the ones breaking those stories, talking about it. And I remember actually back then we tried to stay as neutral on this conflict as we possibly could until that point, and then we just shifted on over into just being anti-Russian and pro-Ukrainian at that point, because clearly, how in the world can you be neutral seeing that sort of stuff happening? And I gotta say, I gotta thank you so much for the kind words and the high praise, because we've tried our best through the years to stick on the facts and the info as much as we can, and it's a good thing to know that still to this day, you think that we are still at that high level of factuality and reporting ability. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jody Mandelias, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Jody, as well, for that $20 support. And Jody said, I made the live on time tonight. And thanks as always for the best, the most current, and most accurate news. And please take one from the chat and LSA.
And thank you so much for the massive support and the kind words. And we always try our best to make sure that this show is as high quality as it can. And I thank you so much for enjoying the news that is hopefully the most current and the most accurate. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor, Jody. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. And Matthew, what do we got from the live chat?
And the one from the live chat goes to Northerner, who said, will those Tomahawks ever show up in Ukraine? Honestly, right now, not looking too good for it. I'll be honest with you. It looks like they've generally backed out of that commitment, or at least that offer. The U.S. is going to hold off, all because Putin called up the U.S. officials. That is going to put it on hold. So that's kind of wild. That's really wild to think about it in that perspective. So maybe the Tomahawks will show up eventually, maybe, but right now they're definitely not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it's probably not going to happen. Like, if we were to take a shot at it, I would say probably not. Sanctions haven't happened on Russia. That's been touted for 8 months. We've also been saying that we're going to support the Ukrainians more, and in any data that you look at out there, financially, the U.S. is supporting Ukraine next to zero at this point, and the Europeans are even decreasing support to some degree. So I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, I don't think they'll ever show up inside of Ukraine. Counting, like, not to sound pessimistic, but counting on the United States these days to actually do anything that's beneficial to our sphere of influence or to the U.S. directly is betting against the odds, to be entirely honest. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. Not to sound like a pessimist there, but at this point, folks, I've run out of patience at this point with the current administration. They say a lot and they do nothing. That's really the run-of-the-mill sort of a deal with everything in foreign policy at this point. And if they ever do anything, it's usually the most destructive action that could be made for the United States in any limited window of time. Like, for example, starting a larger trade war with pretty much the entire world at the beginning of this year and then backing off of it because of how destructive it was going to be. And now they've laid out the groundwork for the Chinese to start up the trade war they're doing right now with us. And then the Chinese laid claim today by their foreign ministry that the U.S. was the one to start that earlier this year, so they're just preempting us before we can do it again. So pretty much we gave them a blank check to pretty much grab us by the balls at this point and yank us around because of what we did earlier this year, which was not a good move. It's stuff like that that's led me to have very little patience with this sort of stuff these days. I'm not really that big of an optimist on how things have been going for the past 8 months. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Hokey Redneck, and he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Hokey, for being a longtime channel legend. We do appreciate that very, very much. And it's good to see you. He said, the Hawks.
And I would have to say, the Hawks, the Tomahawks, but I gotta thank you massively for the support, and I would this channel keep running. I would hope that they eventually get sent. That's what should be done at this point. I don't even know why we're meeting with Putin a second time. And also, someone just said, you're thinking that's all this administration? No, it was the last one as well. We had plenty to complain about on the last one, but what I will say, though, is that while the last one was also, in my opinion, largely incompetent in foreign policy, at least we did do stuff back then. We didn't just say stuff and then not do it. Like, that's kind of the difference in between the last administration and this one. They wouldn't even say anything in the last administration. It's like it was like a dead frog getting zapped with electrodes and his legs would jerk around. But at least a little bit of something was being done. But in the current administration, what's happening is that we say all of these different things. Ukraine's at fault, Russia's at fault, we're going to kill all the Russians, we're going to, wipe out Ukraine because, they looked at us the wrong way today, this, that, and another. And America will do all of those things. And then at the end, we're still at the end result 3 months later, after all of these 90 million different statements have been made and 90 million contradictions have been made, we're still at square one that nothing has changed and we're pretty much still doing absolutely nothing. And so that's what's getting really annoying at this point, because here on the channel, like for the analysis side of things, we have to take people's statements at face value when they say something, because if you discredit things, the problem is that you can start to get easily political biased if you just discredit things just because you happen not to like someone. So we have to take everything at face value on the channel and then come up with analysis for it. And I put a lot of pride myself personally into the kind of analysis that I give and what will end up becoming of it. And in the last administration, because they were generally like they had knee-jerk reactions to everything, it was very easy to predict what they were going to do. The current administration, it's pretty much impossible to predict what they're going to do, because one day they could promise to give nuclear weapons to Ukraine, and then the next day after that, they're actually saying that Ukraine's responsible for the whole war, and they're the ones who have to end it, and no one should give them anything, and we might as well just sanction them into oblivion. And it's anything in between, nearly, on any given day, and it can completely change. And that gets to the point that it's absolutely impossible to follow out here, and we can't really come up with an analysis to it, which greatly annoys me, because as far as foreign policy goes, it actually has to be predictable. Like, as far as how that works, with how our enemies react to us, and what they know they can get away with and what they can't, and also for the public to know what we're working towards and what our end goal is, you have to be predictable. And it's not predictable at all, and it hasn't been predictable for the entire time that this new administration's been in office.
Also, by the way, Hokey Redneck had a follow-up question. He said, how would Ukraine launch the Tomahawks if they got them?
Generally, at the moment, we don't know. There are experimental ground-based launchers that could be used, but those are incredibly limited numbers and also prototypes. So at the moment, we don't even really know of a way they could launch the Tomahawks, except for the Ukrainians possibly coming up with a way for them to launch them themselves by creating their own launching systems. So that is a possibility, but beyond that, there actually is not a way for them to land launch the missiles, which is what they would have to do.
Good deal.
So I hope that does answer that well. But generally, that's my 2 cents as well on the whole thing with both administrations. No, I don't think either one of them have handled this well in Ukraine. And I'd have to be honest with you, I don't really think either of them have handled any foreign policy situation well the entire time we've been covering the news. But at the same time, this one's a lot more frustrating to cover because we have no clue if today's analysis is going to hold. Because to voice to y'all my personal frustrations today, with what's going on now, we've been telling y'all for 2 weeks now, oh, it looks like it's a certainty. The president, he's finally decided he's going all in on the Russians because there's no way to negotiate with them, which is the clear base answer. Like, there's no way to negotiate with the Russians. So now Putin called him up and said, hey, sweetie, I'd love to talk. How about we hang out and get a little lunch together and let me yap about Yaroslav or Rinky Dink, the Wise or so ever. And so now we've completely reversed everything again, which is something that I would have never expected. Like, you can't even factor that into analysis without sounding like you're just coming up with a nothing answer. You could say, well, I mean, we could really screw over the Russians for once and actually force them to end the war, or we could just completely reverse everything and do nothing. That comes off as like a non-statement, so we take the statements at face value for the past 2 weeks and go, oh, we're definitely giving them Tomahawks, and we're also going to start going in heavy on the Russians and actually force this thing to a conclusion because this is the only path that we reasonably have left. Then Putin calls up and we completely cancel everything. Now Ukraine isn't getting Tomahawks. Everything's going to be put on hold. And now we're going to go actually talk to him a second time when we've already made it clear, and the president's already even made it clear by his own admissions in prior months, that there's no way to work towards a peace right now with Russia in its current condition. And so it doesn't even make any sense. It's just incredibly frustrating to cover, because then we have to get on air tonight and be like, by the way, everything we said for 2 weeks, which was reasonable analysis off of the statements that were being made at face value and analyzing them at face value, just like we did the current administration, just like we did the former administration, now it means nothing because there was just a literal 180 that was done again. And now none of our analysis meant anything, and we've got to build it from the ground up off of what he's saying now, which will also change again in probably a month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. So that's kind of what's annoying about it, and that's also why you're hearing, at least from my end personally on air, a good bit more frustration about this whole thing, because it's just infuriating and insanity how no analysis sticks anymore on anything because because the situation changes day to day just off of I don't know like the what side of the bed the president's waking up on. But anyways, I hope that explains why you're hearing more frustrations than you heard in the last administration. Once again, staying as completely politically neutral as possible. I'm not going to give my opinion on whether I like or dislike them, but at the same time, the analysis side's getting infuriating. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
But there is a solution to this. There is a way to get around it because the U.S. doesn't have to give Ukraine Tomahawks because the Tomahawks at the end of the day, they're not too much dissimilar from the new missile that they've come up with, the Flamingo missile that Ukraine develops domestically inside their country. The only difference that I can tell, and this is just my opinion, is that it looks like the targeting system on the missile that the U.S. has, the what the hell's the name? Tomahawk. I almost forgot the name over there for a second. It looks like that Tomahawk has a better targeting system than the Flamingo, but the Flamingo is still very capable, and also it's a lot less expensive than the Tomahawk. So we did hear some rumors that the European Union is about to use the cash value of 140 billion euros worth of frozen Russian state assets to finance a mega loan to Ukraine. All Europe has to do is simply give Ukraine the equipment and all the supplies they need to ramp up the production of the Flamingo, and then you have a workaround. Ukraine can simply ramp up production, and they can use the Flamingo, which is their own produced missile, to launch these strikes inside of Russia because the risk of the Tomahawk is even if the U.S. gives them to Ukraine, the U.S. could simply say, you know, let's say a month later after they give them, the U.S. could change their mind and say, well, actually, Zelensky, we're not going to allow you to use the Tomahawk to strike into Russia because if you do that, that might escalate and we've changed our mind again for the 100th time. So the Tomahawk is a little bit iffy because the U.S. controls it, but the Flamingo, though, Ukraine can do whatever they want with that. They can strike wherever they want. So maybe the European Union will step up here and help out and give them what they need.
Hopefully so. I would hope that that would be the case. But we'll just generally have to wait and see. Also, one other thing. Someone else said, let's see here. I want to go find it really quickly. The current battle lines, Impuffer 006 said, and I don't know why Nightbot just deleted that Impuffer. I don't know why. But the current battle lines, I pray Ukraine goes ape with advancements ASAP. But here's the thing, though, about that even, Impuffer. Like, I would agree with that. But the problem is that statement even going to stand up in, say, 2 weeks' time? The answer is probably no. I mean, the whole thing will change again by then. So then at that point, the Ukrainians could be told, actually, you're going to have to give up the whole Donbass again, you know, including the remainder of Donetsk that hasn't been taken by the Russians. You're going to have to give that up to end the war. That could be the next move. So then Ukraine is spending valuable lives and munitions for the president to wake up someday in 2 weeks and then change his mind again. And then the situation is now to the detriment of Ukraine and not to their benefit. And now they've wasted a whole bunch of valuable lives and munitions, taking ground that they're going to have to be forced to give up anyways, because now the United States, well, the president, really not the United States, has changed his mind. Or in a couple of weeks, he could then say that Russia has to give back all of the land, and the Ukrainians don't even have to shed any blood for it because the U.S. is going to force it somehow, some way, until he changes his mind 2 weeks later after that again. And so, like, even still for that, that's what also is even more infuriating, is that everyone in the world is in the same sort of predicament we're in, and we're just doing this, having to explain to everyone on air every night when the world's going on. Imagine if you're Zelensky and you're having to go, okay, in 2 weeks' time, we're either having to give up land to the Russians because he changed his mind again, or they're giving it all back to us, or it's something else in between, and we don't even know because he just could change his mind again. He's been doing this for 8 months. And then on the Russian side, the Russians are just gaming the system at this point like no other. Like they sit there and go, you know what, we'll tell the Americans to screw off and conduct significant diplomatic insults to them and treat them like they're idiot children. And we just take it, and then we finally have enough of it. And then Putin goes, oh, you know what? It looks like the economy is in a tank. Let me just call up the president of the United States. He'll probably be goofy enough to agree to meet me somewhere, and the whole economy in Russia will rally because everyone will start throwing their money back in the stock market because they think that this thing will turn out well. And so then he just does that, and the president completely goes along with it. And not only that, throws in additional extras like not giving Ukraine Tomahawks now. We're just completely changing our mind on that. So, I mean, Putin literally reversed all of the diplomatic developments we had been making to actually force the Russians into ending the war because they were going to be at such a disadvantage. Just completely reversed that within one call from yesterday. Like, you know, that's, and imagine what Zelensky and everyone in Europe and everyone else around the world is having to deal with, trying to figure out the mental gymnastics of what the next 180 is going to be in 2 weeks' time from now. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Robert, for that $10 support. He said, I'm so disappointed in the 180 today, and the morons who said Ukraine should just give Russia what they want.
I would say it's generally at that point it's once again becoming appeasement. This is what this is what everyone in the West told the Czechs to do back in the Czech-German border war. Is just give up the Sudeten land to the Germans and we'll stop there. This is the same thing that has been done throughout all of history that just has not turned out well, which is appeasement. It's a bad idea. And it's one that I think that we should not continue to pursue. But of course, I'm not the one calling the shots on that. It's someone else. But this is a terrible idea. This is pretty much incentivizing people to go to war with us because whatever they end up managing to get, they get to keep. So what's stopping them from starting a new war and just pushing until they eventually reach their limit and then just stopping there and keeping whatever they got? It's not a good look for us, and it's certainly not going to be a good thing going forward because we're laying out a bad precedent that if anyone attacks us or our interests, they can just gain whatever they want, and then once they get tired enough, we'll just agree to stop it for them, and then they get to keep everything that they got and then start it again later. So I would have to generally say it's appeasement. I'm not a big fan of this at all. This is a very bad foreign policy move, and I would agree with you. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jake Robinson, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Jake, for that support. He said, Canada says, here's a Tim Hortons double-double, and good, Enforcer Matt and all.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the double-double. I gotta say, it's a wonderful and incredible thing to know that folks like you continue to help this channel to keep on running and allow us to have a Tim Hortons coffee. I personally never had one in my life, but hopefully one day in the near future, I will. But a humongous, incredible thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best we possibly can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Joey. He said, here's $10 to buy some WD-40.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and I gotta say that I thank you for the WD-40 fund. We always need WD-40 to keep those wheels and gears turning. Gears don't turn without some form of lubrication, and that lubrication is provided by none other than WD-40. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also just got a $50 support from none other than Danny B. That is Chef Danny, by the way. And it's good to see you once again, Chef. And thank you very much for that very generous support. And Danny said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And I think the U.S. president is a gymnast, the way he flips and spins all the time in LT, LSA.
And I have to agree with you. I thank you so much for the massive support and agreeing with me on that. And once again, folks, trying to make it clear that I'm not trying to get political here with the frustrations. It's just the frustrations of having to analyze this and make any sense of it at all. And it is really true. The guy's got to be a gymnast. I mean, hell, if they put him in the Olympics at this point for foreign policy gymnastics, I think he would get a gold medal hands down. No one would even come close at this point. And another thing that's crazy is that I'm thinking at this point, all of our adversaries are kind of picking up on that. Hell, I'd be honest with y'all, all of our allies are kind of picking up on that, and they're just playing into it. It's like you can't be this two-dimensional on a foreign policy level like this. And also on top of that, you can't be this untrackable, like where no one can figure out what you're doing. Because, like, to remind you all, before someone says, well, this is the way it works, this is never the way it's worked. In any other prior administration, name your favorite president, whether it's Eisenhower, whether it's Teddy Roosevelt, whether it's Lyndon Johnson or JFK or Clinton or Reagan or anyone. They always made it incredibly clear in foreign policy what their goals were. Like when JFK faced down the Soviets in Cuba, he didn't sit there and go, you know what, IRBMs are fine one day, and then the next day say we're going to kill everyone in Russia if they don't pull the nuclear weapons out. It was a clear, consistent message. The nuclear weapons will be removed from Cuba lest there be serious consequences, and the Russians will pay dearly for this. That was the statement through the whole thing, never changed, and once they reached the boiling point, the Soviets blinked, we blinked, and we all backed off and made an agreement. And it was an amicable agreement, and it worked. That was great statesmanship and foreign policy. When Reagan was president, so that way we can pull a Republican out of the woodwork here, so that way we hit both sides since JFK was a Democrat. When Reagan was president, he was dealing with the Soviet Union. We faced him down quite aggressively a good amount of times, like Operation Able Archer in 1985. Then we would also meet them and talk about, we are not wanting to escalate, however, if you give us no choice, we will. And we took that approach during the entire time of the Reagan administration without flinching, and it worked well. Eisenhower did the same thing. It worked incredibly well. Every president throughout all of history, every leader in history has kept a clear vision in foreign policy. It's never changed from day to day. And that is something I'm trying to make clear to folks that not only is bad for how our enemies view us, but it's also bad for our alliance because nobody can even figure out what page we're on and where we're going. Like, why in the world is Europe so inactive, and why in the world have they been so inactive over the past 3.5 years? I could tell y'all that the argument could easily be made that it's not because they're inactive just because they're inept, like some people like to claim here in America. They're inactive because they're looking to the United States for some form of vision on what the foreign policy is supposed to look like in this area, and they're getting no answers back from either the last guy or this guy, and that's leading them into limbo. Like, the last guy just wouldn't even answer. He didn't even have an idea. The current guy has a different idea every day, and they can't work their entire national apparatus from a day to day on a completely different vision each and every day. And on top of that, there's nowhere to get at that point. You're literally running in circles for the point of it, or the hell of it, really, at that point. But I do thank you for the support, Danny B, and helping this channel to keep running. Official chef of the LSA, and that would be my 2 cents on that. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Hokey Redneck. Once again, he puts in another support this time, and he puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that $50 support. He said, I love Tim Hortons. And what are the odds of a coin landing on the third face?
Oh,
0%.
Zero. In this situation, it's 0%. At this point, the one predictable thing that we know is that it's going to always be one extreme or the other. Either the Ukrainians are completely at fault of the war, or the Russians are completely at fault of the war. We've never seen anything really reach the middle. I guess the one way that it's landed on the third face is whenever he just says, it's too difficult, we're just going to back out and just let them go at it forever, and we won't be involved in it. I guess that's the only time that we could say that it's landed on the third face, but that's never really been followed through. It's always ended up landing either on the side that the Russians are all at fault for everything, or the Ukrainians are all at fault for everything. So
That's the wild part to me. Like the statement, and by the way, I don't want to go on a bashing fest. That's not my intention here. But at the same time, though, there has to be some semblance of justice here. Like, I know the world isn't totally fair. Sometimes the conclusion of things are not always entirely fair and just. But we can't just tell Ukraine to accept the current situation as it is right now, to freeze the front lines and let Russia take what they have. And then what's the punishment for Russia at that point? There will literally be zero punishment. So why wouldn't Russia start up again and just take the rest of Ukraine, or attack NATO at that point? Because we're clearly showing weakness, and we're not pushing the Russians back or making them pay whatsoever. So, and also on top of that, it sounds like the U.S. wants to open up economic relations with Russia, and that's basically rewarding them for the aggression. So I just don't get it. Like, there has to be some morality to this to some degree or another, where we actually give some type of consideration to Ukraine and Zelensky, who have been put through hell for over 4 years now at the hands of that lunatic who's committed countless war crimes that Putin has inside of Ukraine. So it seems like justice is not on the menu right now. It seems like a quick conclusion just to get it over with seems to be the main priority.
And also, another thing I have to say, adding on to the whole economic incentives, pretty much incentivizing the Russians to conduct this aggression again. I don't usually say this sort of stuff, but this is something I have to point out, because this is something that was said. This very same guy, who's the president right now, said back in the 2020s, early 2020s, when he was not president, that he told the Germans that it was a bad idea to open up the Nord Stream pipelines and to expand even larger amounts of economic connections to the Russians, because they weren't to be trusted and they were shady. So if we were to take that statement at face value, that economic relations with the Russians are a bad idea, which is what this guy currently said a couple of years back, if we were to take that at face value right now and then apply that to the modern day, we're now saying that in a way to end the war, we're going to do what the Germans did, which this guy claims was a bad idea, which is greatly increase our economic connections with the Russians and practically let them build a wealth base when they clearly have shown that that doesn't control them in any way, and they're not beholden to any sort of accumulated wealth that they have due to trade with us. So that way they're appeased to end the war. That's literally flying in the face of prior wisdom that's been given by this president, that's a bad idea. Case in point with the Germans and the Nord Stream pipeline, which is what he said. And now we're going to do the same thing with the Russians and then expect that to go over well, although we've already seen that didn't go over well with the Germans and the Russians. I mean, that's literally just flying in the face of wisdom itself to do something like that. I mean, I'm not even saying that in a way to go and attack the guy. He's literally going against the logic he laid out several years ago, which I 100% agreed with when he said it. I was like, yeah, that was a bad idea. It was not a great idea to open up economic relations with the Russians in any significant way and literally give them a pipeline of cash to work off of in the form of the Nord Streams. Now we're just completely throwing that out the window.
Yeah, I'm not, I'll be honest with you. I know some people are going to disagree with this strongly, but I'm not even sure if it's malicious. I know some people accuse the current leader of doing this maliciously, to intentionally harm the NATO alliance. I'm not really totally convinced about that. I think due to his lack of experience in this category, which is geopolitics, I think he's making decisions that he really does truly believe are for the good of the country, but doesn't really fully realize how this has played out before in history, which is a huge disconnect. Because throughout history, we've seen that when evil people like Putin, who are dictators, they see weakness, they pounce. They don't back off and think, oh, well, they're going to give me some leeway. I'll be fair. I'll start playing fair all of a sudden. That's not the way it works. These people always take advantage every single time. So when you're messing with somebody like Putin, you got to deal with them head on. You got to go hard on them and let them know that they can't go any further. But all we're doing right now is letting Putin, for example, Putin initiated this recent phone call. He called up because he was in a bad spot. Putin knew that his economy was struggling, and he bought himself some time by calling up on the phone and having a stock market rally because they had some hope that maybe the war was going to come to an end when Putin has no intention of ending the war. So I don't know. I think the inexperience is starting to show here, and it's really starting to get really, really bad.
And also, I saw someone say, well, I don't think, speaking about the current president, he's evil. Well, I wouldn't say that either. This is from some form of inexperience or ignorance or foolishness. I don't know what it is because the statements are made in earnest every time. I will say that. Every statement that's made, it's made with honest belief behind it in the way it's presented. But it keeps changing. The best way I could come up with it is that he really doesn't know what he's doing, but he's still thinking that maybe this approach hasn't worked yet in 2 weeks, so we're just going to do another 180 again and see if the other one works now instead. I guess that's what's being done, because that would seem to make the most sense, because I don't really like to get into the whole political world where, Biden or Trump or whoever is just evil and they're working off of this evil premise of destroying the country. There's actually an actual attempt to do something beneficial. It's just that it might not be, or it might end up being unbeneficial just because they thought it was a good idea, but due to their naivety or something like that, it ended up not being a good idea. Something along those lines would seem to make the most sense to me. But I really just, I cannot get this across enough. I just really don't understand what we're doing right now. And the one thing that is very important, this is just the number one rule, no hard feelings or anything, but this is the number one rule of foreign policy. You learn about your adversary. You take an approach once you've learned about them. So if this president needed the time to learn about them, we have spent that time for the past 8 months learning all about the Russians, what they're really like, what they think, and what they do. And so now with that, we already know that just about a month ago, the president was saying that the Russians are bastards, they cannot be trusted, and they lie about everything, and they just want to keep this war going for the hell of it until they win completely. So now we know that. We've gathered all of the knowledge we would need to make a decision at this point, or the president at least would have gathered it all. And now we work off of that. Because if they've shown that they were acting in bad faith for 6 or 7, really 8 straight months of trying, there's really no reason to think that they're going to be changing at this point right now. And even if they have changed at this point, we're not at their beck and call, they're at ours. They've made the mistake to operate in bad faith initially. We're going to keep pressing this thing and press the Russians in a vice clamp at this point until they're quite serious and unmoving in the fact that they're actually willing to make some amends or concessions now. That's what we really should be working on at this point. That would make the most sense.
And we can't let the nukes scare us off, because I know some people are about to say, "Oh, we can't bully Russia like we're doing Venezuela because Russia has nukes and they'll nuke us." Here's the thing, though. We're going to have to take a stand here, because if we let Russia take Ukraine and they're able to hold it, and then they defeat Ukraine, then they're going to move on beyond that, and they're going to use the nukes as the backstop to say, NATO, you better not stop us. We're going to take the Baltics. You better not stop us or we'll nuke you. And at the current precedent that we're setting by letting Russia take Ukraine because we're scared of nukes, Russia will get away with that. And they'll do that time after time again, and they'll use the nukes as a way to threaten NATO to back off. We can't take the position that just because Russia has nukes, we're going to be cowards. We can't do that. At some point, the line has to be drawn. And I say draw the line right here. Don't let it take a step further. Stop it right here before it goes any further. Otherwise, when are we going to stop it? What, are we going to let Russia take the entirety of Europe and then say, oh, okay, we'll take a stand now because the U.S. is at risk? I don't think that's a good idea.
Also, by the way, I saw Brian West say, "What's your better plan, guys? You don't like the current president's plan. What's yours?" I'll actually tell you just up front what my plan would be. So, let's say we're in the position we are today. We can't change what's happened in the past. So, for some reason, I just wake up tomorrow and I'm in the president of the United States body, and I'm the one making the decisions. So, I'll tell you all how I would go about this from here on. One, we would cancel the meeting with Putin. There's no point in having it. They need to truly show that they're willing to make some sort of concession at this point. We will move forward with providing Ukraine with the Tomahawk missiles as a form of leverage. It'll be made entirely clear through de-escalatory channels, so the Department of Defense will directly contact the Russian Ministry of Defense. None of these Tomahawks are nuclear armed. They are being provided in conventional forms only. That would be made incredibly clear to the Russians up front, because while we do want to put the Russians in the hot seat, we don't want to put it to the degree where they think they might actually be nuclear armed, so we have to make that openly clear. The Tomahawks will be provided. We are going to completely stop all talks with the Russians, or any attempted talks for now. Even if they request them, we are going to deny them, and we're going to put them in the hot seat, and we're going to let them cook there. Because at this point, they made it clear over the past 8 months, if we're not counting the rest of the war entire, and we're just counting the current administration's time in office, they made it incredibly clear to the current administration they are operating in bad faith. They are not looking at reaching any amenable peace in Ukraine, and if they are willing to talk about peace, they are only willing to talk about it on their terms, where they get what they want, and they don't even consider what we would want. So with that in mind, there's no point in talking to them right now. They have to at least meet us in the middle. So we are going to let the Ukrainians put them in the hot seat. We'll continue to provide them with intelligence and data for them to be able to conduct their attacks inside of Russia successfully and cause the largest amount of economic and military damage that they can to the Russians, and give it about a couple of months into next year. And by then, the Russian economy and the military should be so bad off that either they're actually going to start a larger war with us, which would be a deadly mistake for them, or they are going to be willing to actually talk about reaching an end in Ukraine and meeting us at least halfway. And that means meeting the Ukrainians halfway. If they are willing to meet us and the Ukrainians halfway in that negotiation, at that point, I would consider that to be a success. But we just can't keep talking to them in the way they're talking to us right now. So that would be my plan. Like, that is the difference in the current plan versus the plan that I would make if I was the president of the United States. That just makes the most sense at this point.
I sure would like to do this, and not for political reasons, but just to genuinely ask the question to understand where they're coming from, because they are the people we have right now are who is actually in charge of the country. So just for everybody's peace of mind, I would really like to know where they stand on this issue. Like, I don't know if we could ever pull this off, but if we could have, like, for example, the Secretary of State or somebody come on, and not for like some type of gotcha thing or something like that, not where it's like, oh, you said this, and like put a zinger on them or something, like a legitimately calm discussion about what the actual plan is without getting into too much detail that would expose our inner workings, just to get an idea of where they're coming from on this. Because if we could simply ask, like, the Secretary of State this question about where we draw the line for Russia using nuclear threats against the West, that's a question right there I think they would have a hard time answering, because I'm not even sure if they know the answer to that yet. And that's a question that we need to know the answer to have a really good strategy from the get-go. So I'd be curious to see what they said. I doubt they're ever going to come on here. I doubt we'd be able to get them on here. But if we could get one of them on here, that would be very fascinating from my perspective. I'm sure for the audience as well, about what they actually have to say.
Yeah, I would have to say that as well. I mean, like, I would be very interested in having someone like the Secretary of State come on here and we can discuss. And of course, it's not going to be a gotcha thing. We're not partisan, so gotchas don't really make too much sense. It would actually be to figure out what the position is and why it's being done this way. Maybe we can get a good explanation of that, or maybe we can give some good ideas that haven't been considered before, although I'm sure they have been. But still, at the same time, I see some people saying, let's see, I saw someone say, let's see here, the money's on the, let's see. Someone said, that sounds like a good plan. And here's my thing. Here's what I was actually trying to say here. I just finally got it. I have, like, as far as politics go, folks, if we're talking about political figures, I have nothing against any of them. Like, I don't really care about their personal convictions, their religious beliefs, their morals, what they do in their private lives. That does not matter to me. What matters is that we have someone in that is getting results. So I don't really care if you even like the guy or not. Like, as long as they're achieving the results that we're looking for, that's all that matters. And in this situation right here, it doesn't even require a different president. Like, everyone always likes to go, oh, if it wasn't so-and-so and it was this other guy, it would be done right. No, it doesn't even matter about the guys. All the guys, like, they could all be different guys and take the same approach and we get the same results. That's just the basic answer to it all. And so the current guy who is in charge right now, I would heavily suggest that the approach that I just laid out on air, that is the only, Matthew can 100% agree with me because we talk about this off air and we agree about that approach all the time. That is the only approach that can work at this point. It's the only one that we have that is a viable play. Anything else is going to end up in failure, or it's going to end up in waffling, and that will also end up in failure as well. So, like, the current guy can execute that plan in the foreign policy play, and it would work, most likely. Because what other recourse do the Russians have? Because also on top of that, we have to remember, folks, the Russians threaten the nuclear threat against us as if we were made of stone and we will not react and we're like an inanimate object. We will nuke them back if they nuke us. So this destruction of which they speak, it's not one-sided, it's doubly sided. We have a mutually assured destruction doctrine here in the United States of America. So if they try to nuke us, 70% of all Russians will be dead within the next 2 years after that nuclear exchange, most likely including Putin himself. And at that point, that would clearly, at that point, dictate logically, unless they're just working on some sort of a plane outside of logic, that they would need to talk their way out of this rather than get into a major conventional war, because it will end up in their demise along with ours. That's the entire premise. We worked on the Cold War, and it worked well, and I would assume that it would work well now. And I mean, if Putin is stupid enough to keep pushing forward to nuclear destruction at that point, I'm sure that many people in the Russian government would start to realize there is a way out without them all ending up dead, and they would probably start to see that the Russian government would start to overthrow Putin, because at that point, I'm sure many of them would deduce that he's absolutely insane. And if they try and conduct a coup, they might end up dead if it fails, but they're certainly going to end up dead if he keeps pushing forward with nuclear destruction or a path to it. But that would be my approach to the situation. It seems to make sense to me. Let me know what y'all think in the chat. Does that make sense to y'all or not? But that's my 2 cents on how we should be approaching this.
Indeed, I would say we need a good approach. Yes.
And so with that, folks, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Keys Wizard, who puts in a 10. And Keys said, I'm just paying my monthly Cult of Matt membership fee in USA. And thank you very much for contributing to the Cult of Matt. Of course, just joking. We don't do cults here, but we do a little trolling from time to time, as they say. So thank you very much, Keys Wizard, for that $10 support, and we appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 10 from Barry Young. And Barry said, for a 12-pack of cage-free range eggs.
Thank you so much for the support. Those are those high-end eggs. Those aren't just your average eggs. Those are the high-end eggs. And I got to say a humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for supporting the Egg Fund. We have to get some eggs. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Do you think Marco would ever agree to come on here?
I don't know, really. I would have mixed feelings about it. Hell, you know what? Just shoot him a tweet right now and ask him if he'd be willing to come on. Let's see if he responds. I mean, if he did, we could do that. It wouldn't be a normal show, folks. We would have to do it at some other time. It would be a live show, however. Well, actually, it would probably be pre-recorded. Well, no, actually, we do it live, probably. We'd have to figure that out. But go ahead and shoot him a tweet, Matthew, and see if he'd come on. Because if he would, I mean, I would have him on. I'd ask him some questions.
Honestly, if Marco Rubio, by the way, I'm not sure who listens to us because we obviously have a large audience out there. If anybody is listening, by the way, because obviously I know he's busy right now because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a very hectic time in the world. But I would personally fly to DC and go there to do that interview. And even if the enforcer wasn't able to do it, I would personally go there myself to do that interview. Or if he was willing to hop on to a call and do the interview, we would be more than happy to have him on, and not for political reasons. We're not trying to get into, Republicans said this, Democrats said that. Just purely from a foreign policy perspective, just to ask a couple of questions and hear the genuine response to it, and not to get into an argument or something like that, just to hear where they're coming from on some of these issues. Because I would be very curious, just from a curiosity standpoint, to know exactly where they stand on some of these questions that are more of a bigger picture issue. And our media in this country has done a terrible job at asking these questions. They want to ask these zingers instead of asking questions like the nuclear question, like what happens if Russia keeps threatening nukes and they start taking Ukraine, they fully take it, and then they move on to Baltic states. What are we going to do? Where's the line drawn? Nobody ever asked that question, which needs to be asked. So I would be very, very curious to know. Maybe he'll agree, maybe not. We'll have to see. But I would be very fascinated by that. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Hokey Redneck, and Hokey puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, good sir, for that third support of the night. He said, "Would SLC get nuked? I hope not, because I'll be living there. But he said Ogden is close by."
Let's see. Russian nuclear targets map. Let me go look really quickly. So let's see here. Because they actually have to list, at least to the United States, what targets that they would plan on hitting. Crazy enough, by treaty, we do that with the Russians as well. So we should be able to find where they would nuke. Let me try and find a map here of where they would nuke. Yeah, unfortunately, Salt Lake City would be nuked.
They got Dugway. They have Hill Air Force Base. I mean, there's a lot of it. Also, the NSA's down there near Lehigh. So, I mean, they got a lot of federal stuff there.
Yeah, actually, it does show that the targets would be Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, which would be hit by what appears to be an airburst detonation. Salt Lake City itself would also be directly hit by what appears to be 2 nuclear warheads.
Why?
Well, it's because of all of the defense contractors like these out here, like Northrop Grumman, and so on throughout the city. So we'll be directly hit. And then further on down and in the area around Lehigh, there's also a nuclear weapon that's landing right around this the data center here.
Those bastards. I mean, but they can't do that because I'm living there.
Well, I mean, they don't care. Like, they don't care. I mean, they're going to hit it anyways.
That's not nice.
But yeah, actually, yeah, from every map I can find, yeah, those are areas that are going to be clearly targeted. Funnily enough, though, we're not out of any nuclear blast radiuses in Birmingham. Actually, funnily enough, Matthew, you wouldn't believe it, but the Russians actually have a plan to nuke the Irondale rail yard, the Norris Yard.
Those bastards.
Yeah, they're
wait a minute. You said a train yard?
Yeah, they're not only nuking like military targets, they're hitting anything that's critical infrastructure as well. So they're going after major rail yards, such things like that. So yeah, it's like I think Shuttlesworth is going to get hit, and this should be caught in the radius. But if I remember correctly, I think there's actually a couple of nuclear warheads that are aimed here at Birmingham, and I think one of them is at the Norris Yard actually.
See, that's why I don't like the Russians. I don't like the Russians for that reason alone. That seems like a really pissy thing to do, to start just hitting people with stuff like that. That's really crappy.
Yeah, I mean, that's really crappy, honestly. But you ought to see what we're doing, man, because in the United States, we have a plan to just literally blanket Moscow in irradiation. I think we have a plan, at least in the U.S. attack maps that have been shown, to not only conduct several air bursts over Moscow, but also direct ground bursts on the Moscow as well. So it literally will turn into an irradiated hellscape in a nuclear exchange, at least the Moscow area will. And considering that 10% of the country live there, while the Russians would certainly get one over on us, even if half of their nuclear weapons are working, we're also getting one over on them as well.
Yeah, well, do you think the Air Force would let me maybe spend the night in the Colorado mountain or something? Like, could they spare a room?
You mean in that Cheyenne Mountain complex right here?
Yeah, I think I have a tour scheduled for that day or something. I think I have to go there for some reason. I think I have to use the restroom. Like, do they have a restroom in the back?
Yeah, they should. Like they should. I actually have heard about some very interesting things about the inside of Cheyenne Mountain, including the fact that a lot of the buildings inside of the cave that they built in there are actually on giant springs, so that way they can kind of
Yeah.
just ride out a nuclear explosion, kind of like on suspension for the large part.
Yeah, that each module inside of Cheyenne Mountain is on those suspension springs you're talking about. So each module has its own independent suspension. So if there's an earthquake or something, they're literally absorbing most of it. I'm sure there's like some small vibration that comes through, but it's nothing like the real deal.
But sadly, folks, I do have to tell you all that Cheyenne Mountain is going to get hit by a direct impact, which it cannot survive, unfortunately. So
What? I bet it's made for that though.
it was made for it back when it was originally built, but nuclear warheads have gotten a lot larger in size since then. And it was only built to withstand a direct impact of the kiloton size the megaton size that would be seen back in the 60s. But since then, up until about the 1980s, the megaton yields got far larger, and so it shouldn't survive a direct impact from the warhead that's currently aimed at it.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah, unfortunate. But that's kind of the thing with that's kind of the deal with everything is that they're always built to the maximum specifications of that era, but they usually get outclassed by more advanced weaponry, like usually everything else. Also, Fort Carson will also be hit directly by a nuclear warhead as well, which is right next to Cheyenne Mountain. This is the Army garrison that's in Colorado Springs, and it's really cool because they have loads of massive motor pools like these, where they keep generators and main battle tanks, and they also have a rail yard to load the tanks on and send them across the country high speed and the most efficiently.
That's why we're building the Golden Dome. They said we want that dome golden. We want it to be able to stop any incoming missile. They said Satan's flying over all the way from Russia. They're sending over multiple Satans. They said I thought there was only one, but it turns out there's a lot. But Satan is not keeping up on his maintenance. They said, sir, Satan is letting himself go. He's gotten fat. That's what they say, fat. They said, he's not maintaining nothing, sir. It's like it's moisture in the canister, sir. They have moisture in the silo. It's a real shithole over there, they call it. But whatever the case is, the Golden Dome, it'll stop those little missiles from flying straight over. I'm telling you, it'll be a beautiful sight. Protection. Always have protection.
I gotta be honest with you, I was speaking to the people in the country, and they said, Mr. President, are you going to stop a nuclear exchange and stop us from all going to heaven? And I said, well, I was being a little cute. No one's going to have, it's going to be a nuclear hellfire. It's going to look like the pits of hell. Fire and brimstone is what they call it, fire and brimstone. Some people have said that there's no better fire and brimstone than U.S. nuclear weaponry, the Trident, the Minuteman. I don't know why they call him a Minuteman, because I remember that some people I knew, they used to call themselves Minutemen, or at least their wives did, and that was not a good thing. Not a great thing in New York City. Not a great thing. But
Oh, they call them Minutemen because they say you'd call them up and order them to a city in a minute, and they'd go right over there. They said, "Oh, Minuteman." They said he's a Minuteman. He gets in the car and he drives there in a minute. That's what they call him. They said he's good at toasters, sir. He knows how to use a toaster. They said put some toast, butter the toast. Make sure you butter it first, and then throw it right in that toaster, and bing, bing, bing. You got fresh toast in 1 minute. That's what they say. Minuteman.
they always talk about these Minutemen, and I gotta be honest with y'all, I was the quickest Minuteman. Some people said that I was out on the battlefield in less than a minute. They called me 50-second man. That's like $5 million man, in case y'all don't know, or the $8 million man, or whatever the hell he was called. I really don't know. But beyond that, another thing that I gotta say is that there is this Will Rogers Shrine of the Sun. That's what they're gonna call it when the nuclear warhead explodes over Colorado Springs. It's gonna be the Shrine of the Sun. Take a look at it. It's this little castle that's built on top of this mountain. It's got a flag of Colorado on it. It looks kind of like a little castle. It looks over the mountain range near Colorado Springs. Kind of a little wild. I'll be honest with y'all. I really don't know a lot about this guy or why this is here, but kind of neat. Anyways, there's also a tunnel here. Look at this. There's a rock tunnel that they built. I guess you could say that it's made of rock, and if it's my rock, it's IROC. That's great, great joke. Referencing Iraq. By the way, still, the Iranians are still salty over that whole Soleimani thing. Soleimani, he got hit by a drone strike in Baghdad, and apparently they said that wasn't real Baghdadi of me, but Soleimani, he's not really around to disagree about that anymore, so we'll just leave that one as it is. But nevertheless,
excuse me there. Them holes must be from Iraq, the way they bagged that ass up. Damn.
Oh, buddy. Yeah, I tell you,
man,
you gotta have those ribs. You gotta have those ribs.
Gotta
And
have them, I tell you.
man, I gotta be honest with you, that was a real wild clip. I don't think that he should have said that in the Cambridge Public Library, but he did. He did say that, and I'm not gonna lie, that's come back to haunt him. It's kind of like Zelensky and the whole piano thing, that's something that a lot of people bring up, and I don't know why. It's, everyone plays a piano with their wiener once in a while. Why in the world's that a problem? I don't know. But still, beyond that, everyone, beyond that, it is time for us to move on into some more questions. I mean, we've been... Oh, go ahead. What's that?
Oh, you gotta send them through that humiliation ritual. Gotta, send them through a little humiliation. Yeah, play the piano, tickle the ivories, something like that.
Tickle the ivories? What are we talking about here? I don't even know what that means. I have no idea.
A good piano. You gotta tickle the ivories. A grand piano.
Oh, I get it. The ivories. That's why we have now given an executive order that everyone can go to Africa and kill at least one elephant. So that way all the ivories are our ivories. They're going to be great. They're going to be wonderful. See what?
Save the elephant.
To hell with the elephants. The elephants have done nothing. Have you looked at them? They're fat, they're giant, they walk around, they eat grass, they eat lots of grass, and they don't really do anything. They're kind of lame like that. I told them that they had to contribute their fair share to the collective defense fund, and they provided nothing, so we're getting rid of the elephants, everyone. The elephants are gonna go. I don't really like them that much. Look at them. They got these long noses. They've got these incredibly long noses. Look at them. Look at them. When they send their elephants, they're not sending their best. They're sending the ones with the shortest noses, the smallest tusks. Really stupid looking.
Excuse me. You like to talk a lot, sir. You say a lot of stuff. They say, sir, can you play the piano with your stimulus package? They say, can you play some of that Mozart or Baghdad?
I gotta be honest with you, I don't know who this Mopar or Baghdad is. I have no clue who they are. I never heard of their music. I've heard of, let's see, what is it? I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. God bless the USA. I know that one. I also know, let's see, YMCA, great song, wonderful song. It was made by the YMCA people, great people. They're always down at the Y. I don't know why, but they always talk about boys in their songs. Really weird, but nevertheless, also, speaking of which, there is no such thing as a shopping list anywhere out there. Not real. But beyond that, I have to say, folks, these elephants, very questionable people. Very questionable people. But anyways, with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the next ones.
All right, and our next one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a 12. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. And we jump from voices we jump to animal noises. Duncan said, Baba moo, quack, meow. Matt, what Russian stocks to invest in? Oh, oil? Transport trains? Oh, man, I'm telling you. You know, the Russian stock I think you ought to invest in is none of them. This is not financial advice. Please do not take my opinion as financial advice. But I would say personally, I personally wouldn't touch the Russian stock market. I think the Russian stock market's nasty. Some might say repulsive. I wouldn't touch it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would not touch Russian stocks, me personally. That's my personal opinion, by the way, not financial advice. I have to give this disclaimer. Lest someone take our advice, and that would be scary. Can you imagine people taking our advice? Like, really, folks? Like, our advice? Like, come on, you gotta be down in the dumps. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm just playing. But beyond that, I would say I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot barge pole. Me personally, at least. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Nick, who puts in a 10, along with Mark Dixon, who put in a 10 as well, and Dade Carnes, also known as Raid, who also threw in a 10. And thank you, Mark, Dade, and Nick, for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 10 from Brian Justin, and Brian said, China operates 2 main satellite ground stations in Venezuela, and the primary El Sombrero satellite ground station, and a secondary station in Luepa, and the U.S. wants to nix those facilities.
Wait a minute, the main facility is called the Sombrero?
Yeah, it's El Sombrero.
Well, in Spanish, that would be the sombrero. Like, that's literally what that is. So, what the... Like, That is a very stereotypical naming of a satellite station. Why in the world would they name it that? That like the sombrero isn't even Venezuelan. That's Mexican. Like that doesn't even doesn't even fit the country even. Like that doesn't even make any sense. Like there is let me go pull up the Venezuelan hat. Let me go get y'all what the hat actually is in Venezuela. Let's see.
I thought China was going to call their satellite ground station totally not a satellite ground station or something goofy like that.
Oh, here we go. Here it is. And you know that's what you expect to be like super secret ground satellite station. But here it is, folks. It's the Yosuzi. This thing right here. This is the hat, the traditional hat of the Venezuelans. It's not even a sombrero. So it's like, why the hell would they call it El Sombrero? That like makes it's not even like culturally accurate for the Venezuelans. That's like a Mexican thing. But beyond that, that's interesting. I would still say that's not necessarily a reason to go down there and start a whole war with them. We could just kind of like force the Venezuelans to kick them out if we wanted to, which it seems like they may already be offering. But I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running and sharing that as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Alex Jenkin. And Alex said the LST 325, last surviving vessel, rescued from Greece in 2000, was restored by veterans. And now a floating museum travels the inner waterways, teaching the history of the vessel and the incredible story.
And what vessel is that again?
That's the LST 325.
The LST 325. Oh my lord, I've actually seen this before. That is really cool. In Venezuela, Matthew, this is considered fine sailing, right? You're like, this is a fine ship right here in Venezuela. This is actually really cool. And I got to thank you for the support and sharing that with us. It actually appears that they kept the Greek lettering on the front of the ship. But beyond that, they continue to travel around the world, showing off an American LST. And I got to thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us. That is a very interesting fact, and I've never heard of this ship. I've heard of the James O'Brien. Let's see, the James O'Brien, which is a Liberty ship. Actually, no. Apparently it's not. Surviving Liberty ship. Let me go get it. It's the something O'Brien. Where is it? 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 Nah, it's not that one. The Jeremiah O'Brien, this one right here. There are a couple of surviving Liberty ships out there. This is one of them. I knew of this one. I actually did not know that there was a surviving LST like that. That's actually really neat. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a very generous $50 support from Mike Barnes. And thank you very much, Mike, for that generous support right there and helping to keep the channel running. He said, what is the thoughts on Canada? Plan to spend half the money on the military budget to create a green army, LMAO. And do you mean like an eco-friendly army? Because is that what he's talking about, by the way, before I go any further?
Yes.
Bad idea. Bad idea. We're not trying to save trees. Well, war is not about trying to be eco-friendly. We're not trying to turn it into something that's like an enterprise. Who cares about the emissions coming out of a tank? We hope to never have to use the tank. So, that's more incentive not to go to war. You won't pollute the planet if you don't go to war. So I don't understand if they're trying to invest in like battery-powered tanks. Like, no hate on Canada, but I don't understand why we're investing money in trying to make war eco-friendly. War is not eco-friendly because it literally involves eliminating people by the huge numbers. It's horrible. So I don't understand the logic behind that personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
Let's see here. So it appears that the military isn't going full on green. Like it's trying to lower its carbon footprint. So using like hybrid main battle tanks, hybrid power plants, stuff like that. It sounds like it doesn't make sense. But one thing I will say is that they actually have been seriously talking about electric main battle tanks, even in America recently, not for the environmental aspect, but for the fact that electric motors create high torque, which is great for acceleration. And considering that tanks are generally lower speed and only get up to a top speed of about 35 miles an hour, that torque or ability to accelerate due to the torque is actually very important, at least for tank power plants and propulsion systems. So that is something that I know is being floated around generally as a concept just for increased efficiency, at least in those scenarios. But that brings a whole bunch of logistical issues of its own. Still,
What about what's the problem though if the tank gets hit? if you hit the batteries, I'm assuming they're using lithium batteries to store the power, I would assume, unless they're using something different. Whatever battery they're using, though, if they hit it with a shell or a bullet or something, it's going to catch fire pretty quick. So, what's the plan behind that? If you take one hit to the battery, you're finished.
Yeah, but I mean the truth of that as well is like if you get one good hit on an engine bay with an RPG, that tank is also finished as well.
Yeah, but I mean, technically, though, you might still be able to operate the tank even after taking a hit. Like, if it's a minor hit to the engine, if you get any hit to a battery, you're finished.
I mean, I don't know because like also this is something I just didn't consider. But Graham Alkin said same as fuel tanks getting hit. I mean, honestly, that's true. If fuel tanks get hit, they usually go up pretty quick and they're almost explosive every time. So at that point, it almost is like a lithium battery going off. I mean, like at that point, I guess that's just the factors of war. You know, like if anything that's carrying any form of fuel, whether it be a lithium ion battery or a gas or a diesel fuel tank, if it gets hit, it usually is going to combust. That's what we've seen at least in Ukraine and elsewhere in other wars. So. I mean, I guess they're just planning on dealing with that in any other way, in that if the tank catches on fire or if something like that happens where there's a small explosion, they bail out and abandon the vehicle.
Interesting. I don't know. Like, to me, it seems a little bit like what we got works just fine. But I mean, I guess if the purpose behind it is to go eco-friendly, then I would say that's a bad idea.
I would say honestly, the idea of a zero emission military makes no sense at all. If we're saying that we want to create an electric power system, with say like electric traction motors or something like that to get more torque, I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. But if we're saying we're doing that to decrease emissions, I mean, wars are not ever going to be zero emissions. I mean, look at the war in Ukraine. I mean, it's every other day that they're blowing up some major fuel silo and loads of carcinogens are going into the air as a result of the fires. So, you know, it's like just truth be told, that doesn't really make a lot of sense if that is the case. But you know, a lot of the times these days, like this is what I'll have to say, my 2 cents on that. That is like, and also I'm going to be as neutral as possible with this. So if you hear your group come up and you don't like it, just wait a minute and it'll get around to the other group. That is the consequence of the kind of radical politicism that's seen today, because obviously that's more so of a left-leaning form of a political policy. But on the other hand, if you go towards the far right-leaning side, then it's just, you know, we don't even like trees. We're just going to completely strip all national parks and turn them into oil derricks, you know, and then you get the complete opposite. And it's really not, it's pointless. But like I will say that that makes no sense at all, like in any way. But at the same time, you go to the flip side, which would be the right leaning side, then you're going to get something else that's nonsensical like that, but in a different direction that also makes no sense. So I would really say it's more so just a lack of reason or rationalism that exists in modern politics that creates these sorts of deals. I kind of like how in Germany they didn't really think this out. This was a really political thing in Germany. They shut down all of the nuclear power plants because, you know, oh, nuclear power is bad. That happened after Fukushima. And for some reason, everyone in Germany thought it was a great idea to shut down the nuclear power plants. And then right after that, as a result, because obviously they still have to keep the energy grid running, they just start massively burning coal. And the whole premise of it was that they were going green. That was the original premise of that, is that they were going to go green, but at the same time, they didn't want to do anything with nuclear because nuclear creates waste and it can also create meltdowns. And that's not good. So they shut down all the nuclear power plants in Germany. And then they moved entirely into coal, which didn't even, like, for one, they completely blasted away an actual clean energy source, which is nuclear. And then they replaced it with coal, which then gets completely to the opposite direction of what they were going for. And the whole thing about that is that it has nothing to do with any rational reason, you know, or anything like that from any direction politically. It just has to do with, you know, knee-jerk reactions and they're trying to get votes and they do something silly. So that sounds a lot like that in one of those ways, which is why I always think that this modern push to radicalize and politicize on both ends, it's very destructive no matter who's in charge, because they don't work in reason anymore. They just work in feelings and a complete lack of any sense, knowledge, or logic. They just work off of what they think sounds good, and it doesn't even really work in practice. But anyways, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from Nigel. And Nigel said, which would you say is our biggest threat in the next 5 years? Russia, China, or both? With minor or major cooperation? Thank you both. LSA. I would say the entire axis is a huge problem because it used to be separate issues. Like we would look at China, then we'd look at Russia. But now, because of the wars breaking out, now China and Russia are closer than ever. And it doesn't matter what their prior relationship was, they've been forced together by necessity now. So I would say them as a whole, meaning the Axis powers, is a huge problem. So it's become very, very simple these days. There's the West, and then there's China and Russia, and that whole sphere. So everybody's taking their place. It seems like they're at the starting point for a very bad race at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it's definitely the Axis powers. If we're to say which one is more threatening, it's definitely the Chinese because of their military and economic positioning, at least in my opinion. But the Russians also make up for that with the amount of nuclear weapons they have. But when we're talking about a nuclear exchange, a dozen nuclear weapons is about as devastating as several hundred at that point, because our ability to even effect any assistance or aid to the afflicted areas in the event of 12 nuclear warheads hitting the United States would still be overstretched to the point it'd be impossible to even render aid to most of the impact sites. So I would have to say the Chinese are definitely the biggest threat just because of their size, their population size, their economic figures, and their military out of those two, if we were to just assess them at that face value. Also, I saw someone in the chat say Germany's power is this and that. And that is true. Let me go show y'all Germany's power grid. German power grid. Power grid. Let me go get this for y'all, because this is actually quite interesting. This is the difference in energy production that, as you can see here, a year over year. And you can see that Germany actually did have a significant nuclear power production capacity in recent decades. But around the time of 2011, they had already started to decommission them before that due to a whole bunch of other things in Germany. But around 2011, at the Fukushima disaster, this is when this really took hold, and they just started to try and shut all of them down. They have shut all of them down by 2022. That was when the last nuclear power plant in Germany was shut down. But the thing is, and this is something that is something that a lot of people don't know, wind and solar are the worst forms of energy that can be produced. Not because of anything to do with the political side of things, but with how power grids work. Power grids are not really existing in the current form, although it might be possible in the future, to store large amounts of power made on rainy days. You have to produce the amount of power that the grid is demanding at that very moment, and you have to be able to fluctuate that production in exact tempo with the amount of power that's being pulled from the grid. So basically, the way to look at that is, if you want to run at a speed of 6 miles an hour, you have to use your muscles to get yourself up to that speed. If you want to go 5 miles an hour, you decrease the amount of energy that you're exerting to run, and you run a little bit slower. If you need to run faster, you just increase your exertion and you go a little bit faster. Same thing with the grid. Like, you cannot go right now, I'm going to exert energy right now and then save that for my run later so that way it doesn't feel that bad. Like, that wouldn't work, and that's also how power grids don't work. With wind and solar, they rely on their exposure to the sun, for solar at least, which is, of course, intermittent from day to day and completely varies from season to season. And then also wind is the same as well. It varies greatly from season to season, day to day, and hour to hour. And that means that those forms of energy production do not meet the demands of the grid. They are called passive energy producers, which means that they just produce power that can be used on the grid if it's needed, but everything else has to keep up with its demand. So then the issue is, so what if there's more pull on the grid? Like, what if more people are needing electricity at that very moment than wind and solar is able to produce? And if that's the case, you just get rolling blackouts, or you just get complete power blackouts in those areas until enough people turn off their power pull, and then it is able to stabilize the grid. So then at that point, your energy grid isn't running conventionally, it's running unconventionally, because instead of the consumers dictating the demands on the grid, it is actually the grid itself that is dictating to the consumers the amount of electricity they can pull, which is going to be impossible to coordinate. So then at that point, you have to have something that directly inputs power into the grid. And that's when we return right back to our normal forms of fossil fuel energy producers like gas or coal, or oil for that matter, which is incredibly dirty, or nuclear. And nuclear is the best way forward because if you look at it, one, it is incredibly clean. The nuclear waste can easily be disposed of as long as we have a permanent storage facility, which is only a matter of bringing into being, which is more difficult said than done, unfortunately. But you can bring that into being and put that in a permanent storage site where it will not contaminate the groundwater supply or anything else. And on top of that, not only is its carbon emissions extremely low, if that's what you're concerned about, but it also creates a huge amount of power for a very small amount of ground area that's covered. When you look at wind and solar, especially for solar farms, the land that solar farms encompass is completely unusable. It can't really be used for agriculture or anything else. It's just wasted land to produce that energy. With nuclear power, it has an incredibly small footprint compared to that, and also compared to wind. And also, nuclear power plants do not pose a threat to any bird life because wind turbines have been proven over the years to be killing an excessive number of birds. Because birds don't really get the whole concept of a spinning blade in the middle of the sky. So a lot of them end up getting killed by that, or they end up getting killed by the solar farms because they fly over and they get cooked flying over a solar farm because they produce a great deal of thermal energy. So nuclear is the way forward. Like, and on top of that, even if you do not care about clean emissions, it hits the other political side incredibly well because it's very cheap. It's extremely cheap for the amount of energy produced. So not only is it clean, it's also cheap. So it hits everyone's boxes perfectly. It's the energy of the future. I just wish that was the case. But that's really why, like with the Germans, this doesn't really make any sense because it's cool on paper until you realize that this is not meeting the demands of the grid. Everyone has to meet what the grid is able to output, which is very unpredictable. And then at that point, the Germans are having to import a lot of their electricity from France. And if you look at France's power grid, which I'll show y'all here, France runs most of their power off of nuclear. 70% of their power grid runs on nuclear power. And so the French are able to actually meet the demands of their grid, and not only that, up the production to export the electricity to the Germans whenever they have a cloudy day or not so much of a windy day, and then the Germans are usually using French nuclear power. So, you know, like at that point, the answer is clearly nuclear. If we get to the root of this whole thing, that is the way forward. It's cheap.
What's wrong
clean.
with that? What's wrong with just using, beautiful clean coal? I mean, if coal's clean, why not just use that?
Coal is nasty in every form. Like coal
But
is
it's clean.
oh man, coal is bad. Like coal, like even if coal is providing no visible smoke, which anthracite coal doesn't provide any real visible smoke, and if it does, it's very small. Even if you use that, coal is very dangerous to burn. Coal actually has as an off product sulfur, radium, and a couple of other nasty side of it. Also, even uranium. If y'all don't know, when you burn coal, one of the trace elements in all coal on the planet is uranium-235. Well, actually, uranium-237, but it's radioactive to a small degree.
Drill,
So,
baby, drill.
oh no, like oh no, like
Frack.
coal isn't so bad that it's going to kill everyone. Like, just to make that clear.
Also, by the way, I was joking, by the way. That was
Oh,
supposed to be a joke.
oh, dude, I was taking that seriously. I was like, man, like coal, like I honestly, folks, I'm hugely invested in coal. I find it to be really interesting and really neat as a fuel source and everything. But it also is really bad to burn, like especially especially if you get low grade coal, like the stuff that comes out of Russia or Germany. That is just insanely bad. Like it's unreal how bad the coal can get as far as what it is putting out in the atmosphere. And that's not just for like we're not just talking about like the green side of things here, whether you believe in climate energy or not, which is a topic we will not touch. But as far as the health effects you can get, coal will lead like if you're around an area that's burning coal, it will lead to an increased rate of cancer. That has been proven. And those are sorts of deals that you really don't want to get into because you're directly impacting your own health off of the significant burning of coal.
When people say drill, baby, drill, who's baby? Who are they referring to?
Justin Bieber, baby.
You call him baby?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, didn't he call himself baby in that song?
I don't know, man. You're the one who said it.
Man, well, he's the one who said it in his freaking song, man. Like, what the hell? What the hell?
I think he was talking about somebody. He wasn't referring to himself when he said that.
Man, I don't even know, man. I don't even know. I'm just here, man. I'm just here, man. What the hell do you want from me? What the hell do you want from me, man? Like, like, who in the world's baby? What were you looking for? The toad? Like the one that popped up on the table and went, "Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal." Are you looking for that answer? What are you looking for? What do you want?
Nobody's ever asked that. Nobody ever asked these obvious questions. Like when someone says "drill, baby, drill," it's like, who the hell's baby? It's like, we never got the answer.
Also, are we advocating for child labor at that point when we say drill, baby, drill? Are we trying to put the babies in the mines? Like, what are we trying to get at here?
I don't know about that. I don't know nothing about that. I think he was referring to a woman.
I don't even know. And also, like, statistically, there's not even a lot of women in the oil business. I think it's like 8% or something. So what the hell are you, what is it even getting at? I don't even know. I don't understand. I don't get it. But anyways, folks, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next support here. This one goes to Hokey Redneck yet again, and he puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support. He said, I talk crap about theirs. You think ours work? Meaning the nukes?
Yes, ours do work. We have a $1 trillion military budget. I can promise you that a lot of that money is going into keeping the nuclear weapons operational. So just by the sheer volume of our budget alone, they should be operational, all of them. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And also someone said, it's an expression, LOL. We know, we're just kidding around. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a 5. And Robert said, I don't even know what to say. Honestly, sometimes that's okay. Like, it's okay not to know what to say. He said, Slav Ukraine.
And Rum Slava. And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And also, Santa Fe Railroad just said, what about hydroelectric? That one's mixed. I don't, like, hydroelectric is, dams are very beneficial in a lot of ways. But the problem is that hydroelectric can cause, and this sounds like a small thing, but I'll explain why it's big in the long run. Building a dam can generally stop the migration of fish in a river upstream and downstream. That doesn't sound like a lot when you say it like that, but some of these species that travel up and downstream in these rivers do end up going out into the larger fisheries in our surrounding waters, like in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic or the Pacific. And by those species not really being able to conduct their migratory paths that they usually would conduct, these species might decrease on the amount of available fish in those fisheries and will start to cause hardships for the fishing industry. That is something that a lot of people don't think of that way, but from an economic impact, that is a small economic impact that they can have. Beyond that, though, I'm a big fan of hydroelectric as well. One, it allows for us to build up a large supply of available fresh water, which is crucially important, especially in more arid regions like the West Coast. Well, generally, like, kind of towards the West Coast, but not really towards the West. Another thing that's incredibly beneficial is that it does create power on demand. All you have to do is open up the water intakes for the water turbines, and we are able to produce electricity practically immediately on demand. That is a great thing about hydroelectric. And also another thing that is pretty decent about hydroelectric is that it does provide, in a sense, another form of an ecosystem that does support other wildlife that can make money for the local economy. So that, and also tourism as well, because usually the lakes that dams produce do create local tourism, which is good for the local economies. One downside to a hydroelectric, however, is that the amount of concrete that's poured is usually like, if you're one of the people who talk about this, it does create a massive amount of CO2 as an offset, but it's a permanent investment, so you can't complain about everything. I mean, that's like, the people who make that kind of claim, I really don't know why, because it's like, then we're just trying to find something to complain about, because it's an investment that pays on itself. These dams will exist for hundreds of years, so if you look at that, you're putting an upfront CO2 investment on cutting down a great deal more if you're one of the people who really seriously consider that. So it's like, what's the complaint here? I really don't understand it. But that would be my 2 cents. Honestly, I think hydroelectric's pretty decent for what it does, although there are some smaller drawbacks. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to iMan1120, who puts in a 5. He said, look up the Secretary of State in the Venezuelan opposition.
The Secretary of State in the Venezuelan opposition?
Yes, I think he's referring to the meeting that took place back in May.
Let's take a look. Is it the lady who got the Nobel?
Yes, I believe she is the opposition. I think
Maria Machado. Let me put in her name really quickly. Maria Machado.
they recognize the tenacity of the opposition.
The tenacity. And this is the lady right here, Maria Corina Machado, born in 1967, aged 58, in Caracas, in Venezuela, and is a part of Vente Venezuela. Let's see here. Has 3 children and was educated at it appears to be universities inside of Venezuela, which would make a lot of sense. So let's see here. So what are we supposed to particularly be looking at here?
I think he's trying to make a connection. He's trying to allege, I believe, that the Secretary of State has some type of personal relation to the opposition leader. I think. Me personally, I don't really see that. Like he did meet with the opposition figures back in May of this year. He met with them, and also the opposition leader Maria here. She told and recounted all the bad events that had been happening in Venezuela, and also all these different I think prosecutions that the Maduro regime was carrying out. But I don't really see anything other than just professional conduct going on here. Personally, I think he just simply did what all Secretary of States would do, which is simply meeting with them to find out what was going on. So I personally don't see anything with it personally.
Oh, look, she was in the Oval Office in 2005. Huh.
Interesting.
For some reason, I'm not going to lie, this picture looks like it's made with AI, like with how the face looks over here.
A little bit, a little
Like,
bit.
like
She's
the
been
teeth.
she's been involved with the U.S. for a while. That's
Like,
2005.
do you notice this though? It's like her teeth in this picture, like cartoon teeth, like where it's like one giant tooth up there. Like that's why I'm saying that. Like for some reason, like it's like there was like an airbrush put on her face in this picture, and it's like blurry. I don't know why, but I guess it's the focus. I guess they put the focus on Bush. He's about to tell her that fish and man can coexist peacefully or something like that here in a second, I'm sure. But interesting, very interesting. But still, I thank you for the support. I hope we address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next support goes to Danny once again, and he puts in a 20 this time. And thank you very much, Danny B, for that support. And he said, Chef Danny again, it's been a day. I got into it with our bar manager, and then got into it with the head chef that took my job when I stepped down.
Oh.
And I can't wait till my business takes off so I don't have to work for someone else. Honestly, Danny, I'll tell you, working for yourself it carries a whole new burden with it, but I do like it quite a bit. It definitely has its advantages, but also it's not all peaches and roses like most people make it out to seem. Like, oh yeah, if you're working for yourself, you just do whatever you want. It's like, well, no, if you're working for yourself, you don't really have hours anymore. When people say you don't get to set your hours when you work for yourself, that means because you work 24/7. That's what that actually means. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I hope that your catering business takes off here really soon, so that way you don't have to work for someone else. Because working for someone comes with its pros and cons, just like working for yourself. But I would honestly say that I think a lot of people, when given the chance, would take on a lot more work to work for themselves, because most people do not like working for someone else, which I completely get. I didn't really like working for other people. I don't think anyone does. So I would completely get that. But unfortunate to hear that that happened today. But I do hope that the catering business explodes, so that way you don't have to work for someone else again. And so, big thanks to you for the support. I hate to hear that, by the way, but still, a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $7 support from Christian Menard. And thank you very much, Christian, for that support. He said, on a fun note, what is your favorite song about war? I have to go Zombie by the Cranberries. And is that a song, by the way? I mean, he said the band Wolves cover is amazing as well.
Uh, I actually don't really have a favorite war song, Christian. I Mr. Christian. I have to say that because of the Bounty movie, like, Mr. Christian, what are you doing out there with that Tahitian woman? But beyond that, I would say,
What was he doing?
oh man, they were doing like crazy stuff. like man, like you don't want to know. But beyond that, and that's also why the captain had a problem with it. Captain Bligh, he's like, "What are you doing with that Tahitian woman? They're damn near stopping you from being a British officer of the Royal Navy, sir." And I'm talking about the one that had it was the 1980s version of the Mutiny from the Bounty. It had Mel Gibson in it as Mr. Christian. If y'all know who I'm talking about, because the actor in that, when he was the guy who did let's see, Hannibal Lecter in the Silence of the Lambs, that actor. And honestly, I think that actor is a great actor. I think he's great. But I like the accent that he did because it was supposed to be a Somerset accent, and he did it really well because that's where Captain Bligh is from. And so he would always put that, he would always emphasize the R's in his word, Mr. Christian. What are you doing with that Tahitian woman? You know, you're like, sir, you know, you say sir in a particular way. I was like, that's actually how they say it in Somerset. So, like, big respect to him. He got the accent, like, dead on. But still, beyond that, also Robin Stevens said Captain Bligh was a real SOB. I'd actually have to say I went in a deep dive in that, not to get off track of this question here, but I went into a deep dive on that, and he got a really bad reputation for no good reason. He was incredibly lax for Royal Navy standards of that period. The reason why they made him out to be an asshole is because he was a second lieutenant in charge of the expedition with no officer corps behind him, and he also didn't have Royal Marines on board that ship. What he was demanding of the crew was entirely expected during that time. Even less so, he was really lax, and they just gave him a bad record from the 1960s movie, and also for some reason they just gave him a bad record because it was one of the few mutinies to ever happen in Royal Navy history. So a lot of people assumed he had to have been a bad captain because it was a mutiny, and it's very rare in the Royal Navy. But the truth is that he had a very exceptional career afterwards, and generally everyone who came into contact with him said that he was a very competent commander and an officer. And his second expedition actually worked. Like, he did another expedition to Tahiti for the breadfruit, and it did work. It's just the first time they screwed him over by not giving him a detachment of Royal Marines to keep order, and also a corps of officers to work with him. But beyond that, I would have to say, unfortunately, I just don't really listen to a lot of war songs to actually be able to give a good take on one, really. So, unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that, but I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to,
Huh?
I don't know what's going on outside. There's like helicopters everywhere. Do you hear that?
Nah, me personally, I don't.
Yeah, it's like shaking the front windows and stuff. That's the second one that's flown by the front here, and it sounds like it's circling. I don't know what's going on with that. They found me. They're coming for me. But anyways, jumping on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Joe Emily, who puts in a 5. And Joe said, "This may be political, but thoughts on Southcom Admiral retiring? And sorry for the can of worms."
It's questionable, because considering the time at which this retirement is being placed, and even if you only expected to be in the command for a short period of time, this is a very odd time to leave, considering that they're in the middle of an actual active operation within that command. So I would say it's suspect. I can't really come up to a full conclusion on that unless we get a clear statement from the Admiral about that, but interesting nonetheless. So with that, I hope that is addressed to the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Oliver Klossoff, who puts in a 5. And he said, "If China invades Taiwan, which experts believe will happen by 2030, do you think Taiwan stands a chance? And will the West defend them? And should we?"
I would say they do stand a chance, especially with foreign support. They will be able to hold, but we have to be firm in our resolution to actually defend them along with themselves. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Whiskey Echo, who puts in a 5. And he said, "We've passed the point of no return, have we not? I don't know. It just feels like it."
I would say that we haven't necessarily passed a point of no return. We never passed a point of no return until we passed a point of no return, Mr. Christian. And so I would say that I don't think we have just yet. We're getting there, but not yet. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sundown, who puts in a 2. And a huge shout to Sundown for that support. He said, "Mr. Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, I appreciate y'all."
And we appreciate you greatly, sir. And so a big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Squirrel, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Squirrel, for that support. They said, "For Acorn Catapult."
Hey, I love the squirrel jokes. Those are gold, actually. A huge thanks to you for the support. And we are on to the next one.
Man, I'm telling you, there is something going on outside. Like, no joke. I'm not just saying that. Like, there is legit something going on. Somebody's either escaped, they're coming to get us, or something. Because that is not a normal medevac helicopter I'm hearing outside or a normal medical helicopter. That is a big helicopter and it's circling around outside. I don't know what the hell's going on out there, but we'll find out. But our next one here goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Dupper, for that support. And also, big shout out to Plazant, who put in a 2 as well. And we appreciate the both of you very, very much. We also have a 2 from Hoodoo, Texas, who said Maduro would love to be a U.S. client dictator.
You know, that would be a real great position to be in, actually. That would be. So I would have to say a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, Matthew, let's see. Interestingly enough, just to get you a little bit of information on that, that is a military or government helicopter out there that's in this area. So that's quite interesting. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
They said, y'all run y'all's mouths one too many times. They're coming for you. Oh, man, I tell you what. Oh, look, a U-Haul van just pulled up. That's funny. Somebody's moving in 1 o'clock in the morning? What? 1 o'clock in the morning move. I'm just joking, by the way. The U-Haul van's not here. But honestly, though, that is unusual. I've never seen that before. So hopefully they're not coming for us. Hopefully we haven't said one too many bad things. Also, by the way, there usually is like normal medical flights that go past our general location on the way to a hospital. But at the same time, though, I know what that one sounds like. I know the model of that helicopter. This one is definitely not that helicopter. I can promise you that. This sounds like a Black Hawk, which is quite interesting. I know DHS uses Black Hawks, so quite fascinating. Maybe they've come to give me that interview in the middle of the night. That's fascinating. But anyways, moving on to our next one. This one goes to Sean, who puts in a 2. And Sean said, do you think the reason for Venezuela is actually about Iran?
I would have to say that I would highly doubt that, honestly. The situation with Venezuela is most likely going to be about the Chinese, really. So with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sam Crenshaw, who puts in a 1. And thank you very much, Sam, for that support as well. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And it is now time to jump into our live chat questions proper. And we have a good amount of them right here. And we're going to jump into our Morse code decoders first. And tonight, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Copioteryx, Sire, and Brian Blairstown. And they said, the Morse code says, Maduro getting real scared because the U.S. won't even let him talk his way out. And LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of... Huh?
It's back.
Yes, it is currently conducting patterns out there at the moment. So it is back. I'm looking at it on the radar at the moment. But that is the Morse code message of the night. Y'all got that dead on the nail. And that is absolutely correct. I got to congratulate the Least Speaking Signal Corps for getting that correct time and time again. Because it is truly incredible and amazing to know that y'all continue to get that right every single day. And so a humongous congratulations to y'all so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the live chats. We actually will be able to gather a couple here, more than 3 at least, before we round this thing out for the night. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
Also, by the way, it's literally flying right over our place. That is wild. Like, it's flying literally... What the hell is going on? It doesn't even have a registration. It's like unnamed. It doesn't even have a name on it. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see that.
That is whack. Like, that is really whack. I've never seen that. That is really weird. Where the hell did it come from? Hold on a second. Let me see where the hell this thing come from. So, interesting. It came from Bessemer. Huh, that is really weird.
Also, by the way, it might not really be good to say all this on air. You know, it's like an OPSEC sort of a thing. But
oh, you can't tell nothing from that. You can't tell anything from that. You'd have to be like a master genius to figure out where the hell that's at from that. But that is fascinating, though. Interesting. I'm kind of curious to go outside, but we're still in the air right now. I'll have to find out in a minute. But anyways, jumping on from this and jumping into our live chat questions proper, we're jumping into our first one here. This one goes to Mystical, who said, did you hear that Zelensky is willing to trade drones for Tomahawks?
Actually, I have. That was actually an offer that was issued to the White House today. And also, Matthew, I've got to say, weirdly enough, if you look around in the whole of Alabama at all the helicopters in the air right now, crazily enough, none of them have like any info. None of them at all. I just checked all the 4 helicopters around Birmingham. There is not a single one that actually has any real info on them or even a picture.
Oh, wait. I found the life flight helicopter, by the way. You know, I was just saying the medical helicopter flies around. I
Yeah.
just found the life flight helicopters in downtown Birmingham. So it's not even near us. This is a totally different helicopter that's currently circling around. Totally unnamed. It's literally flying. It's flown literally in circles like 6 or 7 times. I've never seen that. And if it was a life flight helicopter, they would be landing by now because whoever it is on the ground, if that's a medical patient, they'd be in some deep trouble if they hadn't already landed. So that is something. And look, it's coming back for another pass.
Oh, interesting. So with that, we are now we actually have started to go overtime, and so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one goes to Judy from the live chat. He said, "Does it look like there is going to be an overthrow of China's government?"
I would generally say it's decently unlikely in my honest opinion. There is a lot of schisms going on, and it's a somewhat more unstable time for the Chinese Communist Party, but I have a feeling that they will be able to manage it. This is nothing new for authoritarian regimes, and usually they do survive. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right. Also, by the way, do you want to go get a picture of it, by the way? It's literally right. It's coming back.
Sure, why not?
Okay, if you can filibuster for a second, let me get a picture and I'll be right back.
All right, everyone, we're going to be waiting for Enforcer Matt to go get a picture of this mysterious helicopter. Ooh, what could it be? We honestly have no clue. But one thing that I can tell y'all is that some people are saying that this is an everyday occurrence in Compton. LOL. And you know what? Honestly, it probably isn't that far off, really. Someone said, could it be an alien ship? Nah, it's not an alien. It's not an alien, that's for sure. And so someone said maybe they're listeners. Well, they could just listen into the show. I mean, like they would hear everything that's going on right now if they listened into the Enforcer show. Which, by the way, y'all are quite fortunate. Y'all can just listen into the Enforcer show right here, right now. So make sure to give it a listen. Y'all greatly appreciate it. And also, we see. Let's see, some people saying all kinds of interesting stuff. Is the 3-1 Atlas or the 3i Atlas? Maybe. Ooh. And also Matthias threw it at 50 and said they are looking for Hot Dog Man. Honestly, that's probably the most likely one, is that they're looking for the Hot Dog Man. That is what I'd have to assume. The Hot Dog
All
Man.
right.
Oh?
I am back. I went outside and saw it. It is definitely doing something. It's looking at something on the ground. It is going in a circular pattern over and over. It is very low. I've never seen that ever before. So I have no clue what that thing is doing. I'd be very curious to know what the hell it's doing. But it is flying around, and I've taken a picture of it. You really can't see much, but it looks like it looks like it is indeed the model they're showing on the registration. So fascinating.
Very fascinating indeed. And so with that, folks, it's now time for us to move on. By the way, I already got the 50 from Matthias. And a huge thanks to you for the support, Matthias, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right. Also, by the way, somebody saying now show us. I'll show y'all the picture I got. By the way, it's not a good picture. I'll be honest with y'all, but I'll send it to Andrew over Discord real quick so that way he can show y'all the big grand reveal here of what we have. Let me go and send this over to him real quick. This is top-notch reporting right here, by the way. Let's see here. Also, I'm getting messages from everybody talking about picture, please, picture. It's just an Airbus helicopter, by the way. It's nothing wild. It's actually not a Black Hawk, so it is just an Airbus. There you go, Enforcer. I just sent you the 2 pictures of it. You really can't. It just obviously it's just navigational lights from the helicopter. So also it's not giving away our location. Like you can't tell where we're at from these pictures.
I gotta say, that thing might be a UFO, actually. Like from these pictures, I mean, who could say? I mean, it's like a cylindrical object. But still interesting. I wonder what they're doing over there. I wonder what they're doing. But anyways, with that, folks, we hope we addressed that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, so this one goes to none other than Halligan, who said, could India have wanted to keep the oil deal quiet, but was caught off guard when the U.S. admin announced it, and now they're trying to do some damage control by denying it?
It could possibly be the case, but at the same time, I doubt it because the Russians. It's not really like you can hide that fact from the Russians. If they're not getting purchase orders, and America is, they would already know whether or not the Indians announced that publicly. So I'm kind of doubting that. That's what makes this mysterious, is because it's not really like you would hide that from the Russians. The Russians would know anyways because you're not buying their oil. But I hope that does address that the best that we can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right. And also, by the way, I see people saying that could be the sheriff's department. Possibly, maybe so. I know the general area it's circling around. I could be, possibly. I don't know. We'll have to do some more investigating. But anyways, jumping into our next one, our last one of the night. This one goes to Besselel, who says, if Andrew and you were in office, how would you take on this new and forming Western or anti-Western alliance?
If I was in office as president of the United States, you have to really deal with them from a country to country basis. With the Russians, I already laid out how I would deal with them earlier. With the Chinese, we do have to be a little bit more light-handed because of the position we're in right now with them economically as a trade relationship, but I would still be trying to incentivize U.S. companies to rebase their operations in other countries like Mexico and elsewhere that would be a lot more aligned to the United States, or at least somewhat within our sphere of influence. But generally there's so much going on in the world, to be entirely honest. It'd be hard to break down the entire foreign policy prerogatives from region to region. It would take a really long time. But generally with the big ones, the Russians, I explained earlier how I would deal with those. And also with the Chinese, I would be a lot more light-handed and try and keep the trade situation amicable until we could move most of the trade out of China and then slam them right then and there once most of the trade had been moved out. Whoever was a straggler and was not able to move out, that's going to be a little unfortunate for them, but at least at that point, the damage would be largely mitigated at that moment. So with that, I hope that.
Also, by the way, I got some more information on our friend. This is a government or military helicopter, is what this is. So it's not it's definitely not medical. So whatever this thing is flying around, and it's currently flown it's flown more like 30 times in a circular pattern. This thing is government or military, whatever the hell this thing is. So that is very, very wild. I don't know what the hell they're looking for, where they're circling right now. So I'm like, whatever's going on over there, I'll be very curious. It must be a bad individual that they're looking for over there.
I'd have to suppose so, apparently. But with that, I hope we address that the best that we can. And crazily enough, folks, it's time for us to move on, I think, to the final question of the night. And so, who is like last? Actually, I think we already did address that. Okay, okay, good. I'm getting distracted here about the whole helicopter thing. But with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream, folks. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run this stream for each and every single one of y'all once again. And I hope that the news was incredibly good tonight. Of course, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And folks, if there is a short war video to be made tomorrow, it is actually not going to be made by me. It's actually going to be made by Enforcer Matt. So y'all will actually have another day, another chance that if there is news to be made in the midday, it'll be made by Enforcer Matt. And so with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow on tomorrow night stream at 10 p.m. Eastern, and also midday as well for the short war video. And of course, I will be making that tomorrow if there is enough news for that video. And also, please don't forget to bail me out. Also, I'm just joking, by the way. But anyways, we will see you all tomorrow. And with that, folks, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.